Hello friends. Welcome to Luffy Fiction. How are you all? So here I am back with part 5 of What If Luffy Held the Key to the Sea's Secrets. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. For you, Blue, Nami winces as her heel scrapes against the leather back of her new shoes. It was supposed to be a small expedition into the jungle to find the South Bird that Nolan told them about. A mad dash chase through the thicket after a crazy tropical bird wasn't really what she had in mind when preparing to leave. She scowls. That bird is dangerous. Carefully trapped in Zoro's net, it isn't going anywhere, but Nami still steers clear. She should already know by this point that any campaign Luffy leads is bound to involve a lot of running. Nami thought it would be alright since she was just wearing little spool heels, but she forgot that she hasn't broken them in yet. Hence the continual throb of pain coming from her feet. She's going to get blisters for sure. Her mouth opens to complain, but then shuts slowly with a small click. Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, Robin, and Luffy walk beside and in front of her in the haphazard formation that's continually changing in direct correlation with the sporadic shifts of Luffy's attention, thoughts, and whims. The navigator forgets sometimes that Vivi is no longer here. It's strange that someone she only knew for a month or two has left such a mark on her. Vivi's absence leaves the strangest displacement in the air around her. There's a void that her blue-haired Nakama once occupied. Nami knew she would miss Vivi, but she didn't really realize how much the lack of her steadfast female companion would affect her. Not being able to complain about the blisters her heels are giving her feet is one small detail on a rapidly growing list. She misses having another woman on board. Nami loves her crew, but Luffy and Zoro are both incredibly masculine in their own very different ways. Sanji trips over himself to revel in her gender, sometimes in ways that are too much for her, and she'd never ask for sympathy from him. He'd literally sweep Nami off her feet and refuse to let her walk for the next week without crying, hovering, and worrying. Usopp projects and lies to create an image of a macho man. And Chopper imitates them often, sometimes without realizing it. The lack of a calming female presence bothers her. Vivi was a very good foil for her. The navigator is perfectly aware of her occasionally brash and abrasive personality. She knows the ways of daintiness and femme fatale and chooses when and when not to use them, while Vivi had an innate delicacy and constant diplomacy in all of her words and actions. It was nice to occasionally be the loud, ridiculous one, and not to have to be the level-headed one in charge of all the idiots. Oh, how she misses her female friend. Of course, Nami isn't the only female on the going merry. She knows this. She even acknowledges that the other woman has that sort of calm, methodical way of thinking that Nami enjoys in a friend. But that doesn't change the fact that the other woman is Robin, or Miss All Sunday, or who knew how many other aliases she's sailed under. Her switch from Miss All Sunday to the quiet, polite Robin who only wants to help is too sudden, is too much. The archaeologist's quick change of personality only makes Nami doubt her every word and intention. In addition, Nami hasn't forgiven her for what she did to Vivi's country. Even if she somehow didn't have a direct hand in the events, which Nami doubts quite heavily, she joined and perpetuated the longevity of an organization that drove Vivi to tears, tore into her sleep with tremble-inducing nightmares. That fact sits and simmers in the back of Nami's mind, occasionally reaching a boil when she isn't paying enough attention. She tries to stop it, but forgetting about who Robin really is has only gotten harder as time passes. Mostly because everyone seems to be forgetting. Chopper, though still a bit wary, has begun complimenting the archaeologist when she adds her 2 cents to the discussions they have. Nami admits that her knowledge of things utterly obscure does come in handy when they're trying to find an island in the sky that may or may not actually exist, but still. He shouldn't be so quick to accept her as a crew member. It doesn't make up for what she's done in the slightest. Sanji's acceptance is somewhat excusable. She's a woman. That's really all there is to it. Usopp is wary of Robin, which is nice, except it's mostly because of how she sometimes says morbid things offhand. It creeps Usopp out, but it doesn't breed distrust within him. Not like it should, anyways. Zoro seems like the only one she can really rely on to keep an eye on Robin with her. Unfortunately, When she was complaining to him about Robin's decidedly real betrayal, Zoro shrugged it off. Who knows if she meant it or not? Luffy seems to think she only wanted to help. That's just it though, she and Zoro are supposed to help Luffy. They're the ones to correct him when he's wrong, keep him safe, keep all their hearts safe. It's like Zoro's distrust is perfunctory because of her background and because he's the first mate, not because of the dangerous and conniving woman Robin still is. Of course, it goes without saying that Luffy is Robin's biggest supporter. He chats with her, he laughs brightly at her weird jokes, he dances with her now and again, he asks Robin about her dream. Admittedly, Nami does not know what the dream is exactly, but she doesn't really want to. Whatever the other woman's dream is, it left a positive impact on Luffy, and Nami strives to be objective and he grins at her with sheer trust. It's the way he grins at the rest of the crew, and Nami doesn't want Robin to have that pleasure, that gift. It shouldn't be so easy to dole out, it wouldn't be, if it were anyone but Luffy. But it is her captain, so Nami can only sigh and acknowledge that he is capable of an incredible faith that still stuns her. She sometimes wishes she could throw her anxieties and paranoia to the wind like he does, and just accept people as they come. But she can't. Her time with Arlong, relatively short as it was, taught her that trust isn't something to give implicitly. Only Luffy bypasses that fact. So she takes it upon herself to be wary, to keep a sharp eye on the other woman. And Nami knows that her distrust of Robin hurts Luffy on a deep, fundamental level. She still remembers the awful breakfast they had when Robin was wisely avoiding them but Luffy refused to take it. Nami knows she wasn't the only one to notice that Luffy couldn't eat. No matter the context, that should never be a thing, regardless of how much all of them gripe about his ridiculous habits. Before she could ask him, beseech him to stop and be okay again, Ace had physically picked him up and left. And after a breakfast which had been completely bereft of the usual energy and joy, they exited the galley to see Luffy crying. Nami had never seen her captain cry, and it's very likely it has to do with the way they were treating Robin. Of course he smiled, and it all but evaporated the tear tracks on his face, but the last thing the navigator wants to do is cause Luffy pain. It hurts that she is the cause of it, and unable to support him as an objective friend. So she's glad that when she unknowingly damaged him deeply, Ace was there. Hard as it is to admit, Ace seems to have the ability to soothe the pains that none of them can sense at times. Luffy deserves to have such a wonderful and considerate brother in his life. Just thinking about their combined smiles and contagious laughter lightens Nami's heart considerably. It reminds her, in a way too pure to bring pain, of Nojiko and all of her fond memories with her beloved sister. She smiles to herself and plows on through the jungle grass, tree roots, and vines littering their way. Her feet still throb, but positive thoughts and pleasant memories occupy her attention nicely. Finally, they exit the brush. This bird had better be worth the trouble, Usopp gripes. If Skypia doesn't exist, I'm going to let Luffy eat it. Zoro grunts. Quit whining, it, Nolan, Chopper exclaims, cutting the swordsman off. Nami's eyes jerk towards the house, and she finds their recent friend bruised and bleeding on the ground. Everyone immediately runs over. Chopper shouts for someone to call a doctor, until Robin kindly reminds him that he himself is a doctor. Nami's anger spikes as a similarly battered-looking Masira and Shuju explain that they were attacked by some pirate named Bellamy who took Nolan's precious gold. The cruelty and audacity of people never ceases to astonish the navigator. But we didn't go into town. Nami turns around to face her captain, whose face is blanker than usual. To be honest, the navigator didn't even know there was a town on this island until Nolan told them. Luffy's luck had struck again when they docked on the side of Nolan's house, seemingly randomly, and stumbled across possibly the only person on the entire ocean with knowledge of Skypia. Though she wants to buy some new clothes, and Sanji wants to restock on food, no one on the crew has been to the town. So why is Luffy mentioning it? What? Usopp asks. We didn't go into town, Luffy repeats. What does that have to do with what happened here? Sanji asks. We didn't go into town, so why did? Their captain cuts himself off. He pauses for a long moment before readjusting his hat so it covers his eyes. Ace told me the world doesn't revolve around me, he murmurs cryptically. And okay, Luffy can be confusing, but not cryptic. She won't take cryptic. Luffy, But he's already begun to walk off. Where are you going? Sanji asks. Do you perhaps intend to reclaim the gold, Luffy-kun? Robin asks, knowingly. Of course. He doesn't even turn around. Come on then, Marimo, before you go and get lost, Sanji says, putting out his cigarette beneath his boot and following after their captain. Shitty cook, the only reason you find your way is because you're following behind Nami or Robin like a dog. How dare you? My, this will be interesting. Robin laughs lightly and joins as well. Being the responsible one, Nami looks to Nolan. Do we have time? The knock-up stream won't hit until 12 tomorrow. It's best to leave a few hours early, so you all have 6 hours. It takes 2 or 3 hours to get to town. I suppose it just depends on how quickly your captain can fight off Bellamy. Nami's shoulders relax and an assured smirk slips over her lips subconsciously. We'll make it back in time. Well then, Nolan grunts in pain as he levers himself up. We will get your ship ready. You shouldn't be moving so much with how injured you are, Chopper says worriedly. Nolan's eyes are determined, and Nami knows he won't be convinced by anything the doctor has to say. On occasion, Nami feels bad for the reindeer because all of his patients are so unruly and unwilling to take his medical advice seriously. Usopp looks impressed and a little put off by Nolan's determination and seeming numbness to his smattering of injuries. Why don't you stay and monitor him, Chopper? Nami offers. The reindeer looks relieved by her words and exhales. Good idea. You two better hurry though. He gestures to the rest of the crew who are already a fair way down the beach. I'll stay too and help with repairs. Captain Usopp will let Luffy try his hand at it. And, not to brag, but I am quite the carpenter. Usopp flexes his arms and pats the muscle. I once built a mansion for the fairy princess who visited my village some years ago. She was lost on her way to find the hero who would save her fairy people from the persecution of the evil Trout King. She had only stopped for rest, but little did she know I was the hero she was looking for. Really? Chopper asks. Nami smiles before turning and hurrying after the rest of her crew. The running hurts her feet, but she's too excited to miss out on this. Sanji and Zoro spend the time during their walk verbally fighting, filling the air with familiar, meaningless chatter. Robin keeps to herself, as she often does. Luffy is just as quiet, which Nami sort of expects by this point. When it comes to friends, he assumes a seriousness beyond his actual age 17, not the age he acts, which places him between 7 and 12. His occasional sudden shifts to stoicism don't really bother Nami anymore. To be frank, she's excited to see her captain kick this Bellamy person's ass with the seriousness he rarely portrays. The navigator missed her captain beating up Crocodile, which she would have paid billions of berry to witness in person. Seeing his utterly mangled form covered in bruises and blood was pretty nice, she admits. And the joyous astonishment on Vivi's face was beyond invaluable. They reach Mocktown in a bit over 2 hours, despite the relatively sedate pace. Entering the main street of the town with the majority of her crew is like walking on air. It's late, but for many, the night has only begun. The streets are still relatively full, so stares and whispers follow every member of their party. Flanking their captain on each side, they look powerful, and Nami feels it keenly. With Luffy heading the charge with his incredibly determined expression, Nami isn't afraid of anything. Wonderful, reckless adrenaline fills her, and she lets the fierce currents take her anywhere the rapids lead. Their captain walks through the main street before stopping outside of what looks like a bar. Nami can hear sounds of partying, laughter, and the merriment that comes after a successful raid. That's about to end. Bellamy, Luffy shouts. The din inside the pub hitches for a moment, and murmurs follow. After a moment or two, a man exits from the swinging doors followed by a moderate crowd of spectators. The man's spiky blonde hair is set above eyes too wide and too wild to be trusted as sane. He aims that unsettling gaze on them, seeming to know right away who called to him. Who are you all supposed to be? He asks. Wannabe pirates. I don't give out autographs, kiddies. The group behind him bursts out into laughter. They're mocking. Petty nature would normally set off Nami's temper, but in this instance she feels cool and collected. Because these people have no idea who they're dealing with. Give Nolan's treasure back, Luffy states. His words make the laughter stop, and surprise and amusement take its place. Friends of that old coot? Bellamy asks. Hey, wait, Bellamy, I think I recognize that kid. Yeah, that stupid hat. He's got to be Straw Hat Luffy, a man wearing a fur coat says to Bellamy. We saw his wanted poster earlier. 50 million berry, remember? Bellamy smirks. 50 million isn't bad, but it doesn't really compare to 55 million berry. Those 5 million berry make all the difference. It's what separates the real pirates from the wannabes. Over her months with her captain, Nami has learned not to judge anything by its appearance, and even less so to trust the numbers on a wanted poster. Because 50 million berry does not represent her captain's strength at all. And relying on what the posters tell him instead of his gut will be Bellamy's downfall. Luffy hasn't reacted to a single word. Give Nolan's treasure back. Wow, you are really desperate for a fight, the man with the fur coat says. Just give it to him, Bellamy. It'll be a good laugh. You have a point, Sarkis. Bellamy grins. Pay attention as I show you what a real pirate is. With no further warning, Bellamy crouches down. His legs suddenly melt into coils and he leaps forward towards Luffy so quickly that his features blur. Nami and every other Straw Hat present hastily move out of the way, all while keeping their attention glued to the fight. Luffy doesn't even twitch, even as the attack grows startlingly nearer. He looks up from the shade of his hat, and his eyes seem to sharpen somehow. With a slight twist of his torso and a step to the left, Bellamy flies headfirst to the other end of the street, smashing into a building. Even as Luffy's clothes settle after the rush of air from Bellamy's attack, he doesn't fidget or twitch, remaining as still as a statue. In fact, had Nami blinked she doubts she would have noticed he moved at all. What a lucky punk, Sarkis utters from the back. Though the crowd was utterly silent after Bellamy's failed charge, some of them start regaining their bravado, smirking about the brat's uncommon luck. A sudden shift in the air pressure around them is the only reason Nami knows Bellamy is attacking again. Similar to the first attempt, Bellamy rockets himself towards Luffy with startling speed. And just like last time, Luffy shifts ever so slightly out of the way, making Bellamy crash into a street sign. Luffy's impressively effortless feat is only made more incredible by the fact he was facing away from his assailant. Beyond that, Nami and the rest of her crew are close enough to realize that their captain's eyes are actually closed. The navigator hears Zoro's breathing pick up, and a slight rattling from his swords as he grips the hilts tighter. Nami is similarly amazed. She knows her captain is strong. She's seen him effortlessly dispose of opponent after opponent without much strain at all. But those were small fries from the East Blue. Their first real battle with someone with the strength of the Grand Line was Crocodile. And Luffy returned without even a scratch. Nami remembers very suddenly that Luffy took out Arlong when he was around 12. She has really underestimated his strength, hasn't she? Sanji's expression is close to Zoro's, of tense amazement and self-analysis, but he has the added trait of curiosity, as though he senses there's something more to Luffy's dodging than just miraculous speed. But what else could it be? Robin looks utterly unaffected, and has a mild smile on her face. Nami recalls that she and Luffy met in the past and wonders how strong he had been then to generate such an unsurprised reaction. Oi! Stop messing around. Sarki's voice is more strained, though still filled with bluster. Just finish him off with that. Bellamy, whose expression had been stormy with anger and a trace of fear, suddenly grows self-assured. He lifts himself fully from the wreckage and grins wickedly. Well, you're much stronger than I expected, being such a runt. Bellamy's eyes grow even crazier. You should be honored that I'm going to finish you off with my most powerful attack. Crouching once more, Bellamy's hands start twisting and changing into springs as well. With a powerful push off the ground, he sends himself hurtling to the clock tower, then the bar, then a house, and Bellamy is all over the main street at once. His voice, hard to hear over the wind, is laced with breathless laughter. You realize now what a fool you are to challenge me. Just as foolish as Nolan with his island in the sky. This is the end for you, Straw Hat. With great momentum, Bellamy shoots towards Nami's captain. Unlike the last two times, Luffy doesn't move to dodge at all. Instead he raises his hands and catches Bellamy's coiled feet. The inertia makes him slide back a foot or so and a great gust of wind sweeps past him. Bellamy is stopped dead in his tracks with a serious case of whiplash. Gasps and shouts of disbelief echo from the crowd and most especially Sarky's. And to be honest, Nami's stunned too. She pictured her captain dodging or punching the blonde pirate. Watching Luffy take a hold of his quick, powerful legs with such ease is eye-widening. Bellamy, to his credit, doesn't give up. After shaking the daze from his mind, the pirate pulls his lower body up and aims a springy fist towards Nami's captain. But Luffy is quicker. He shoves a sandaled foot into the other pirate's stomach, sending him sprawling down the road, kicking up dust and dirt and making cracks spider web around Bellamy's final landing spot. Gasps and shrieks sound, but it falls silent as Luffy slowly walks towards Bellamy. His pace is calm. There is no swagger in his step or pride in his strength. And Nami adores this quality in her captain. Because he never tries to frighten the people around him, or intimidate them with shows of power. He just is strong, and inspires awe and fear from his cool behavior. When he reaches Bellamy, who is twitching and trying to raise himself, he places a foot on his chest to keep him pinned. "Give Nolan's treasure back," he says a third time, simply. "Why, you brat." Luffy lifts his leg to deliver a final blow, when someone starts shouting from one of the side streets, hidden by the crowd. "Hey, Bellamy, Sarky's. They released new bounties. Are you done with that brat yet?" A man pushes himself to the front of the silent crowd and his jaw absolutely drops. Bellamy. Then his eyes drift to Luffy and he pales even further. "Your straw hat, Luffy," he points. "The man worth 150 million berry." And Nami doesn't think there is a single person present who isn't stunned by the number. Even the ever-impassive Robin has wide eyes. Luffy's bounty tripled. Only her captain remains unaffected, his legs still hovering over Bellamy. Shaking like a leaf, the blonde pirate shouts, "Take it. Just take the old man's treasure. It's on the bar counter." After a tense moment, Luffy lowers his leg back to the ground, and walks into the bar. He reappears a minute or two later with the gold wrapped in a brown cloth tied to his back. And as he walks back towards them, almost everyone flinches, especially Bellamy. But Luffy's eyes, while still rather serious, are no longer dangerous in the slightest. He silently starts heading out of town, back the way they came, and the rest of the Straw Hat Pirates follow after, except Nami, who takes a minute to memorize this moment. The navigator was right. It felt good watching him get someone for hurting their friends. Nami can't help herself, she turns to Bellamy. "It's that 95 million berry that makes the difference between the pirates and the wannabes." She shrugs. "But even if your bounty was 200 million, you'd never be anything else." Luffy both really likes and really hates Foxy. On one hand, he does make tons of fun games. On the other, he kept threatening to take Luffy's nakama. For some reason, the team captain thought he'd be better at some of the games since he was doing them for a second time, but he strangely wasn't. They were still as weird and confusing as last time. Well, at least the fight he had with Foxy went much better. Those traps were sort of annoying, but with a little observation hockey it all worked out pretty quickly. And at the end of the day, all of them had a bit of fun. So Luffy figures it was worth it. After Luffy's fight with that jerk Enel, which while easy, was as serious and annoying as last time, a fun, relaxed day with his crew is just what he needed. Now they're heading back to Tanjit's house to try and help the man and his horse, Shelly, get to a different island. Luffy knows it isn't he and his crew that will help Shelly and Tanjit, but Aokiji. Luffy's brow furrows. After breaking through the thicket, they reach the clearing. Behind a tall rock, Luffy sees the Admiral again. A strange ambivalence fills his chest. Chopper runs forward to collect what he assumed to be a mushroom, like he did last time. Like last time, he bumps into the tall Admiral's legs and falls down. After stirring, the reindeer looks up and his jaw falls open. It's a person. Like last time, they approach Aokiji warily as he slowly tugs off his sleeping mask. But unlike last time, when Robin staggers and her legs give out from beneath her, Luffy is there to catch his nakama. Everyone on the crew is startled by Robin's wide, terrified eyes, but Luffy's gaze is on the Admiral. "Aokiji," he states. "Who is Aokiji?" Nami asks. "He's an admiral in the Marines." Luffy's lips are twisted down unhappily. Aokiji blinks. "You know me. Robin must be chattier than our intel reported, he says. That or your grandfather's been talking about me. Luffy's grandfather. Usopp asks with confusion. Why would Luffy's grandpa know you? Only Robin's hands, which clench and unclench against his vest in disconcertingly sporadic bursts, keep Luffy from making a face and paling with fear because of his violent grandpa and his stupid fist of love. He talks. Luffy eventually manages, swallowing back the traumatic memories with a shudder. Then I should be honored. Your grandfather is a great man. He did me a real favor once, kid, Aokiji says. A yawn breaks over his face and he seems likely to fall asleep again any second. Luffy knows better than to lower his guard. Are admirals strong? Chopper asks nervously. The admirals are known as the world government's powerhouses, Robin explains mechanically. There are only 3 on the sea, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akainu. Only the fleet admiral is above them in strength. The 3 admirals and the fleet commander are the 4 strongest fighters in the entire Marines. Luffy's body shivers with pure hatred and rage. If he ever meets Akainu. But Robin's tense with concern, so he forces himself to relax for her. Taking a deep breath and then exhaling, the team captain turns to Aokiji. What do you want? Luffy asks bluntly. Not here to make a fuss or anything, just visiting this nice little island. The admiral's emotionless eyes lazily sweep the area before coming to rest on Robin. Though I am also supposed to do a little reconnaissance for the Marines. What do you want from Robin Schwan? Sanji asks, noting Aokiji's intent gaze on the archaeologist. Luffy smiles. Because even though they just explained how dangerous this guy really is, Sanji has that narrow gaze that tells the team captain he's willing to fight. Nico Robin hasn't been seen since the Alabasta incident. The world government likes to keep an eye on her, you see. And now I can tell them that she's with you and your crew, like we suspected. Okay, now you know, so leave. Luffy's voice is cold, he knows, but he has a knot of emotions in his chest. Like Foxy, he likes and hates the Admiral. When they reach the New World, Aokiji is actually a somewhat alright guy. But Luffy can never fully forgive him for the pain he caused Robin, is causing Robin. She still won't stop shaking. Aokiji pauses. Luffy's chilly dismissal of him makes his brow furrow. I don't think you know exactly who you're sailing with, kid. I do. Luffy knows his Nakama better than he knows himself sometimes. Oh really? The Admiral's brow raises. This is Robin. She likes books, Luffy introduces, ignoring the incredulous expression everyone, including Robin, is giving him. She doesn't like super sweet teas, or hard candies. Her sense of humor is really funny even though some people think it's weird because she talks about death sometimes. She likes putting together skulls and uncovering old things. She's our archaeologist. She has a dream. She's Nakama. That's who Robin is. Why? Yeah, Chopper stutters. She's our friend. Leave her alone. We won't let you hurt Robin Schwan, Sanji says. From beside him, Zoro puts his hand on the hilt of one of his blades. Even Nami is slowly reaching towards her claim attacked. Every group she's joined she's betrayed. Instead of giving an impression of skepticism, Luffy gets a feeling that Aokiji is somehow concerned for them. Don't care. Luffy deadpans. What? Aokiji asks. We weren't there, so why the hell should I believe what you're saying? Besides, now she's here with us, and that's what matters. The Admiral rubs his face tiredly. Kid, you are as stupid and reckless as your grandfather. Luffy stares at him impassively. If you know him, then you know I'm serious when I say to leave Robin alone. Like I said, I owe your grandfather a favor. I think it would be the polite thing to do to get rid of this traitor before she kills you. Let me handle this, he says to his crew, before narrowing his eyes on his target. I won't let you do that. Aokiji runs forward. Robin tries to break from his grip and cross her hands over her chest or even push him away, but Luffy holds strong. He's ready this time. He won't let the Admiral hurt her again. Aokiji pulls back one fist and sends it hurtling towards the pair of them. Luffy finally removes one of his hands from Robin, and darts forward to catch the Admiral's punch. And catch it he does. The Admiral is considerably stunned. Luffy grips the other man's fist and pushes him away with a strong shove. Aokiji lets himself get pushed back, and he regards them more seriously and warily. The armament hockey took the Admiral off guard. He's re-evaluating Luffy, scanning him more intently. And the team captain wants him thinking and checking himself again. He doesn't want to fight here. His Nakama aren't strong enough, and if he goes all out and defeats Aokiji, which is a definitely possibility, his bounty will skyrocket. If he doesn't win, well, everything's too uncertain. Luffy has no idea what will happen if they fight right now. He doesn't want to know, so he closes his eyes. Honing his inner focus, he narrows the scope of his spiritual energy solely on Aokiji, and opens the levees, letting the power flood out of him. As his spirit sweeps over him, Aokiji visibly freezes. His sluggish eyes widen, and his mouth actually falls slightly open. "You have." The Admiral blinks and then lets out a laugh. "Since you're his grandson, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised." No one says a word. Aokiji lets out a sigh. "You know what, this is more work than I want to do right now. I'm technically on vacation, so I'll let you go this one time without telling anyone, as a favor to your grandfather." The Admiral is telling the truth. So Luffy gives him one last look and turns towards his crew. "Let's get out of here." He starts walking. All of them warily file in after him and Robin, who's still in his grasp. Usopp starts. "Ah, what about Aokiji? Up that way there's a house with a guy and his horse. You should freeze the ocean so he can cross to the next island." Done and done. He turns and carries on. After a few seconds of hesitation, the rest of his crew does too. Luffy finally notices how shaky and sweaty Robin is, and recognizes the symptoms. "Ah, sorry, I got you a bit too, didn't I?" It's all right, Luffy-kun." She manages a wan smile. "You've gotten much stronger since I first met you." Luffy blinks at her before grinning. "Of course, I have to be really powerful so I can protect my Nakama. They need to be safe so they can get strong too and go after their dreams." Luffy stares at her meaningfully, and he feels incredibly content when he sees warmth returning to her eyes. She's all right. He laughs and finally releases her from his grip. Impatient and full of pent-up energy, Luffy throws his hands in the air. "All right, let's shove off. I need another adventure. And a new Nakama. We're going to get a shipwright on the next island." "Don't just say stuff like that," Nami scolds. "If we come across a good one we'll try and pick them up, but we're not going to get one at the next island just because you said so." "That's right. The merry only gets the best of the best." Usopp nods determinedly. Sanji spins forward. "I hope it's another lovely woman like Robin Schwan and Nami-chan." "I hope it's a big burly guy," Zoro says dryly. "If there are too many women, you're not going to get anything done because you'll be mooning over them like a lovesick fool." "How dare you? Only someone as stupid and uncouth as you can't appreciate the beauty that lovely women as Nami-chan and Robin Schwan bring to the world in our ship." "I hope it's a woman too, if only to avoid picking up another weirdo like you all," Nami says, sniffing. "Robin, what do you think they'll be like?" Chopper asks, walking to the archaeologist's side. "Strange, I imagine, if empirics are anything to go by." She smiles mildly. Luffy doesn't bother saying anything, because he already knows what they're like. He can't wait to see Frankie again. Everything's coming together more and more. His crew gradually strays closer to Robin as they return to the ship, pinning her in the middle of their small crowd, and Luffy feels indescribable glee. With Frankie and Brook, things will be better than okay. "If I needed someone," Robin smiles while Usopp, Chopper, and Luffy let out cheers and start dancing around deck as they finally dock. Their excitement is entirely understandable. Water 7 is a beautiful, seemingly enchanted island of cascading fountains and whitewashed tiers. The archaeologist is eager to take in the sights and perhaps find a few new books as well. Luffy seems more anticipatory than usual, which makes her smile. Though they aren't here for anything other than repairs, Robin knows better than to expect an uneventful trip. She also doesn't doubt Luffy's words some time ago about finding a shipwright here, which is amusing considering that he said they'd get one at the next island, and lo and behold, the next island is one of the most famous ship-making cities in the world. Islands and cities may seem mysterious and enchanted, but they truly have nothing next to Luffy. "All right then, Usopp, Luffy, let's get this treasure exchanged for Berry," Nami says authoritatively as she finishes tying knots around the brown cloth holding the gold and jewels they got from Skypia. 3 large bundles of incredible treasure sit before them, and Robin has no doubt that they have enough to fix the Going Merry. Which will be good for all of their nerves, as Usopp has been flitting around for the past couple weeks like a panicked butterfly because of all the damage the Going Merry amassed during their arrival and eventual descent from Skypia. Luffy shakes his head. I'm not going. Nami rolls her eyes. We have to. If we don't exchange the treasure, we can't fix the Merry, she explains. Exactly. Usopp seconds. So grab a bag, Luffy. Take Sanji. I want to go check out some shipyards with Robin. Robin blinks with surprise while everyone else on the crew stares at her. Most pointed of all the stares is Nami's, as it usually is. Though the navigator has let up on a lot of her blatantly distrustful behavior, something Robin suspects has more to do with a certain unhappy breakfast after Alabasta than anything else. It still shows itself every now and again whenever she's forced away from Robin and Luffy, like now. Robin still hasn't been able to clarify if the emotions are jealousy-driven, or if the navigator is merely incredibly cautious. Robin personally has no problems with the plan and knows by now that there is no point in questioning the reasoning behind Luffy's whims. That sounds nice. She heads for the boarding platform before waiting. After you, Luffy-kun. It's just Luffy, he protests, but his excited smile hasn't dimmed in the slightest. I'd love to help you, Nami-chan, Sanji says from behind them. With everything taken care of, Luffy jumps off the boat and starts for town. Robin follows after with a more sedate pace. Thankfully, her captain waits for her to catch up before he actually enters the city. The interior of Water 7 is even more beautiful than the outside suggests. The streets and houses are made from clean, white marble, and all the roofs are tiled with red terracotta. Every street is lined by a waterway, making it even more aesthetically pleasing. From what Robin's heard, she imagines that this is possibly similar to what Goa Kingdom may look like, filled with clean streets and impressive buildings. Goa Kingdom is renowned throughout the waters for being the cleanest city in the world, but Luffy's words from years ago filter back into her mind. That place isn't nice at all. They dump all their trash in Grey Terminal. She wonders if there are similarly devious matters running beneath the white, pristine streets that outsiders are not privy to. Robin contentedly follows her captain as he walks through the town. She's relatively certain he has no idea where he's going, but it gives Robin plenty of time to take in the sights and enjoy the city. And besides, things will work out eventually, as they always do with her captain. After an hour or two, Luffy leads them out of the city, towards a strange house built on the outskirts of the island. Glancing at her captain, Robin wonders if she should try and redirect them. Luffy's assured expression tells her not to. It tells her that he knows exactly where he's going. It's strange and she can't figure it out, so she doesn't try. Robin follows her captain as he approaches the very haphazardly built structure with the title, Frankie House, printed on a sheet of metal above the entrance. Sounds of partying and arguing come through the doors, so at the very least it seems like a place her captain will like. Luffy walks up to the green painted door and knocks hard. There's a pause in the merriment, and Robin can hear whispers and questions from inside. The archaeologist would wager that guests are not a regular occurrence at this particular establishment. Eventually the doors open and a woman with peculiarly square hair peers at them through the crack. Who is it? A voice beyond the door asks. Some kid and his sister. She calls back. Robin blinks and gives a small smile while Luffy pouts. I'm not a kid, he mutters. Tell them we didn't steal it, the same voice from before says. I don't know what to tell you, because we didn't steal it, the woman echoes to the archaeologist and her captain. Why don't you two just? Can we speak to Frankie? Luffy interrupts. His words create a pause. What are your names? The voice asks after a moment. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and this is Robin, my nakama. Isn't that the guy with the 150 million berry bounty? Someone else hisses. An array of whispers nowhere near quiet breaks out. I bet it is. I heard Nico Robin, the devil child, is sailing with them, so that might be her too. Frankie bro, we could. Let them in. The first voice orders. The woman opens the door wider and gestures them inside. Robin looks around and notices 50 or so strangely dressed men eyeing them with that same hunger Robin has grown accustomed to since she gained her bounty all those years ago. The desire for the money a bounty offers is tempting for many people, and the lengths some are willing to go to are often unsavory to say the least. This is especially true since she and Luffy have a bounty of 229 million buried between the two of them. Her eyes slide to her captain, who meets her gaze and smiles, entirely unbothered by the display of avarice. As Luffy is unconcerned, Robin decides to simply sit back and watch what Luffy intends to do. "Come in and take a seat. Let's talk." Looking towards the back of the room, Robin matches the lead voice she heard before with a man with shocking blue hair and 3 chins. The archaeologist blinks. A genetic mutation. There have been cultures with similar alterations, but he doesn't share any of the other traits she's read about. Beside him, she sees the woman who opened the door, and then another woman with similarly square hair who can only be her identical twin. She and Luffy walk to a ratty green couch set before the blue-haired man. It leaves their backs entirely exposed, but with Luffy beside her, the archaeologist isn't terribly worried. "So, what brings you both to the Frankie house?" he asks, leaning back and placing his unnaturally large arms on the top of the couch. "Can you look at our ship?" Luffy requests, surprising Robin considerably. It seems they're new acquaintances too. You want it dismantled or something?" Luffy shakes his head. "No, I just want you to check it out for damage." "Why the hell would I do that?" the other man asks. "'Cause we'll pay you," Luffy says simply. "Hey," the blue-haired man smirks. "It's nice of you to offer, but I think taking in both your bounties would be a more lucrative venture, am I right, boys?" "Yeah, Frankie bro," the other men shout back. Without any further warning, Robin and Luffy are assaulted from all sides. Robin, predicting this, already has her arms crossed. She clutches 11 of them at once, forcing them unconscious before ducking out of the way of a sword strike. Luffy's fighting as cleanly as ever, dipping, diving, and very nearly dancing out of the way of enemies, all while raining swift punches over their head for instant KOs. In less than 10 minutes, they've defeated about all of the members of the Frankie house. Letting out a growl, Frankie jumps forward from his seat and charges Luffy. Robin's captain moves out of the way with ease. Forming a fist, Frankie sends a punch spiraling to her captain, and it spirals far beyond his natural reach, facilitated by a rotor and chain attaching the appendage to the blue-haired man's arm. Her captain seems omniscient by the seemingly practiced way he dodges the fist. Well, her theories about genetic mutations may be groundless if he's somewhat robotic, like his attack suggests. Taking out the last few henchmen, Robin leans against the back of the couch to observe the fight between her captain and Frankie. Her captain isn't really fighting Frankie like he was the other men. It's clear he wants Frankie to remain conscious from how he dances around the blue-haired man's attacks without ever taking the resulting openings to strike. Luffy hovers behind Frankie's back as the other man twists and turns. Her captain matches him move for move, never letting the man catch sight of him. Seeing her captain fight is never dull. Robin smiles before crossing her arms and clutching the 2 women with square hair who were attempting to sneak up on her. "Stay still," Frankie grunts angrily. "Won't you look at our ship, please?" Luffy asks, drawing out his word. "No," he shouts. "Why not? I only dismantle ships. I don't fix or check or build ships anymore." The blue-haired man rails. "Go to Galila or some other place, I don't care." "There are government agents theory," Luffy whines. "They don't like Robin, so I don't want to go there." Frankie's eyes bulge and he trips forward. Robin stares at her captain with shock and confusion. Where is Luffy coming up with this information? Government agents in a ship company. The blue-haired man is too stunned to continue their spar, so he just stops and bores his eyes into Luffy. Her captain ceases his constant shifting and just meets the other man stare for stare. "What makes you think that?" Frankie asks seriously. "Well, Iceberg, he's that old mayor guy, right? And he owns Galila. He was an apprentice of that Tom guy, like you were, so the bad government people think." "How do you know about that?" Frankie demands, expression tense and borderline hostile. "How do you know about me?" "You and Iceberg were Tom's apprentices," Luffy states. "That doesn't explain anything," Frankie shouts with shark teeth. "Do you know who I was before?" "Putty clam," Luffy hazards. "Sudsy ham." The words throw Robin for a complete loop. "That's," Frankie takes deep, furious breaths in and out before trying again. Are you here for it? Frankie asks slowly. Are you a government agent? His hands have moved to his arms, which start making strange clicking sounds. Robin slowly pulls both her hands towards her chest preemptively. Luffy blinks. I'm not after Play-Doh. I'm a pirate. The government is mean. Play-Doh. Robin's brow furrows. She dearly wishes she could understand more of what's going on, but Luffy is being as mysterious as ever. That isn't what it's called, Frankie utters, regarding Luffy warily and unhappily. Despite this, the clicking does cease. Ah, I always forget. Luffy shrugs. Why the hell should I believe you? Explain everything to me, Frankie says. Why shouldn't I kill you to prevent you from telling anyone else about this, if you haven't already? Wait, how do you know all of this in the first place? No, Luffy says, I don't want to explain. But you shouldn't kill me, because I don't care about it. Those other things don't matter. Don't matter, Frankie asks incredulously. I just want you to look at my ship. All that Play-Doh stuff doesn't interest me. If it did, why would I be talking to you about my ship instead of fighting you? Though Robin doesn't understand the whole of what's going on, her captain is sounding incredibly logical at the moment. I want you to look at my ship. I don't want to go to Galila because there are government people there. I trust you because I know you're an awesome shipwright, 'cause you studied under Tom. That's it. The end, Luffy surmises. Frankie stares at Robin's captain for a long, long time. Eventually he lowers his fists. If you were a government agent, you'd either be the stupidest or smartest one I ever met. And that seems to be the line Luffy walks very often, from what Robin's observed. I don't want to be a government agent anyways. They're mean, Luffy reiterates. You need to explain to me how you know all of this. Frankie's tone is much calmer, persuasive even. He's evidently a rather charismatic individual, when he isn't shouting. If word gets out, Iceberg and I need to plan. I'm the only one. Luffy's eyes are wide and honest. Your friendship's a secret to everyone else, don't worry. Frankie scoffs. Who would want to be friends with that idiot? His tone is weak and tired. There's a long gap of silence before Frankie asks, how much did you say you'll pay me again? And Robin shouldn't be surprised, because it's Luffy she's talking about after all, but seeing him succeed in convincing someone who was completely unwilling 10 minutes ago is astonishing. 100 million berry. Frankie stares before grinning. That's what an hour or two of my time is worth, I suppose. Luffy smiles right back, and under her captain's unassuming eyes, the blue-haired man regains his bluster. Well, I should charge you for this, and for attacking my friends, but I'll let it slide this one time, Frankie says. Cool, thanks, her captain chirps. Robin smiles. It's quite like her captain to ignore the fact that the two of them were attacked for their bounties. Bygones are always bygones with him, it seems. Where is this ship of yours? Frankie asks, and Luffy eagerly opens his mouth before closing it. Robin chuckles mildly and steps forward to explain the location. Frankie had seemingly forgotten about her, because he starts when she approaches. Though he keeps a wary eye on her, he pays careful attention as she talks. All right, can you come soon? Luffy asks once the small details have been squared away. Give me an hour or so. I gotta get everyone up before I go out. Frankie nudges the head of one of his still unconscious friends. Okay, see you then. He and Robin turn to leave, but are stopped by Frankie's words. Why are you so desperate for me to look at this ship, huh? The two stop and look back. I need to know if she's still saleable, Luffy answers solemnly. Admittedly, that isn't something Robin considered too heavily before this, but with all the damage the Going Merry has amassed, she may well be on her last leg. The loss of their beloved ship would be a devastating blow, both emotionally and practically. She understands her captain's urgency now. All right, I'll be there later. Frankie gives them a dismissive gesture. I'm going to wake this lot up with my new song. A guitar appears in his hands seemingly out of thin air, and the lights dim around him dramatically as he carefully tunes his instrument. Luffy laughs with eagerness, and is clearly reluctant to leave. Though never one to deny her captain his right to make his own choices, Robin gently nudges him out the door. She'd rather not be there when their victims wake up. Luffy cheerfully chatters as he leads the way back through town. Robin's head is spinning with information and questions. How did Luffy know that apparently sensitive information about Frankie and the mayor of the town? Why does Luffy think there are government spies in the city? What is Play-Doh? Luffy never makes sense, but his enigmatical tendencies are usually a bit less muddled than this. Her captain suddenly addresses her, stirring Robin from her fruitless ponderings. That's Frankie. Luffy grins at her. That's our shipwright. Well, he certainly seems odd enough to be a part of the crew, though I'm afraid, Luffy-kun, he doesn't seem entirely willing at the moment. Robin offers her 2 cents. He'll join, Luffy replies simply. And yes, if the conversation they held earlier shows anything, it's Luffy's inhumanly good persuasive skills. He speaks to all of them that way, as though he knows them. It's like he knows what they need to hear, knows what they want to hear, just knows how to talk to them so they feel wanted and special. If her captain wasn't as earnest and kind-hearted as he is, Robin might be wary. As it is, she just smiles mildly. If you think so, then I have no doubt. I'm certain he and the others would get along cool. CP9. Robin's eyes widen and her mind momentarily shuts down. From the corner of her eye, she sees a strange figure in a mask drifting away. She never even noticed them walk past, never realized they were nearby. But they're here, they're everywhere. Traveling with Luffy, she almost forgot. But she's reminded now with startling severity about the truth of the matter. She's always on the run, never safe, never capable of complacency. Her captain even mentioned them earlier, governmental spies in the ship company Galila. It didn't register, the danger, not like it should have. And now she needs to leave. Now, before they attack her crew, her nakama. No, she doesn't have those, she's forever alone, remember. She doesn't have those. From now on, she doesn't have friends or nakama, no matter what CP9 asks or says. An 8-year-old child carefully picks up a pair of scissors too large for her hands and cuts away the emotion that unwillingly and needlessly attached itself to the members of Robin's previous temporary crew. Zoro, snip, Nami, snip, Usopp, snip, Sanji, snip, Chopper, snip, and Luffy, SN, Robin. The scissors momentarily jam themselves on straw and ribbon, and all the 8-year-old can do is stare at the teen grasping her arm tightly. Robin, he says again. She'll clean the joint later, she tells herself. For now, she tries to coerce him to let her go. Sorry, Luffy, I was momentarily distracted. Smile, like she practiced. It looks like there might be a bookstore at the end of the street. I think I'll check it out. Why don't you return to the ship to wait for Frankie? Robin, he utters. It wouldn't be right for you to be absent when your newest nakama comes. I'll catch up. Robin. Luffy, please let go of my arm, she requests. No, Luffy, don't leave, he says. How can he know? He can't, she assures herself, he can't. So, why does it seem like he knows what's going on? Luffy is perceptive, but this is beyond his scope, preternatural as his capabilities are. I'm not leaving, I'm going to a bookstore, she clarifies. I didn't think you'd be interested, but you're welcome to come along, if you like. Robin doesn't want to drag it out, but she'll wait a bit if it's necessary before ditching him. I won't let you leave. Is she transparent suddenly? Robin nearly wants to look down to check but can't seem to break eye contact. I told you, I'm not leaving. I won't let you, Luffy says. Okay, the archaeologist placates. They can't take you away from me. His eyes are filled with the kind of determination that she's only seen in others with the initial, D. That won't do at all. No one's taking me away, she assures. You leaving to go with them to protect us isn't okay either, Luffy says decisively. And Robin is absolutely certain at this point that her captain is able to read minds, he's omniscient, and very likely psychic. This is so absurd it must have an equally absurd explanation. I don't know what you're talking about, she utters. CP9. Cypher peoples. They're gonna threaten us to get you to do things you don't want to do, he answers, leaving her completely speechless. Knowing there are governmental agents is one thing, knowing who and what CP9 is and stands for is an impossible other. I'll protect you, Robin, Luffy promises. So don't leave. Slowly, her wit returns. Robin wants to ask, needs to discover how he knows these things, but finds it difficult to start anywhere in particular. None of this should be possible. The only ones who know about her are the Marines and the world government. Despite what he's revealed to her, Robin can't bring herself to think that the teen has anything to do with the government. If he has known all along who she is, he would have done something ages ago. Anyone would have done something ages ago when they realized the extent of her messed up history. But Luffy isn't anyone, and Luffy has shown time and time again that he doesn't care about who any of them were in the past. When they're with him, it's all that matters. So, Luffy knows everything about her, or at least a fair bit. He doesn't care, or rather, doesn't understand that she's too dangerous and he needs to let her go. So she'll have to convince him, show him the truth. Even though after he understands, he may look at her with eyes that will rip her soul. The rest of the crew isn't involved in my business, Luffy. Robin forces herself to speak smoothly. They're going to risk their lives if I continue to stay on the crew. They may be assassinated if I remain. No one is safe while I am here. What Aokiji said before is true, every organization I've joined has been completely wiped out. And this is the reason why. The Straw Hat Pirate crew will be another victim of circumstance, the crime of associating with me. I enjoyed our time together, she admits. But it's simply time for me to leave. Don't risk your crew's lives needlessly. Luffy has been surprisingly patient and attentive to her every word, but there isn't a lick of doubt or confusion in his steadfast gaze. He opens his mouth. If you leave, we're all going to fight them anyways. We'll come after you, you're Nakama, so we'll chase you to Eni's lobby to save you, if we have to. Luffy shrugs, as though he didn't just propose to challenge one of the main strongholds of the world government and the Marines, as though he didn't just decide to fight the world order for Robin if he has to. Luffy isn't done. Better to fight them on our turf than theirs. Besides, then we'll have you fighting with us so it'll be easier. She starts fighting against his grip. You don't understand their strength. I do. They could order a buster call on this island, if they wanted, he says. Robin's eyes widen at the memories his words bring. Fire and death and endless, meaningless violence. Yes, that could happen. In a world known for its cruelty, that could happen to her again. She could lose everything again. The world can end again and leave her somehow more scarred than before. Don't you see? That's why it's so important for me to leave. She presses, and desperation seeps into her tone despite her staid self-control. Even if they threaten us with a buster call, I still won't give you up, he states. She inwardly flounders at his incredible stubbornness and determination. Luffy takes her other arm. Robin, he utters with such incredible emotion that the archaeologist stills her struggling. I'm not letting you abandon your dream like this. I promised, didn't I? I told you I'd keep you safe so you could discover the lost history. And he's said it multiple times in the past, but beyond warming her heart, she's never realized the truth behind the words. Luffy made some kind of vow. And her breathing picks up, because she's beginning to realize that he will never let Robin sacrifice herself. He'd even said so in Alabasta. You're Nakama. I'll come and get you wherever you go, whoever you join. I won't let you go until you realize your dream. She doesn't want him hurt. She doesn't want any of them hurt. Luffy's incredible caring only makes it harder for her. But faced with his words, she can't doubt his sincerity. Everything has spiraled far out of her control, and she grapples for anything to keep herself afloat. As she reaches out searchingly, desperately, her hands move across the scissors which are still stubbornly jammed. The 8-year-old tries to force them shut, to force them to cut the ribbon and straw. She needs to. It's the only way she can operate. Hurry, escape, start anew, meet people, stray too close, sever, snip, cut the bonds. Hurry, escape, start anew, meet people, stray too close, sever, snip, cut the bonds. Hurry, escape, start anew, meet people, stray too close, sever, snip, cut the bow. The scissors won't shut, because this straw isn't just straw, it's steel and will, and the ribbon is hope and love, and she can't cut those things, she can't cut material like that. If Luffy will fight CP9 regardless of who she's joined, then Robin knows where she'd prefer to be when the time comes. She wants to fight beside him. And if the government orders a buster call, She wants to be by his side as her world goes up in flames for the second time. It would be right for Robin to die with them, beside the boy who instilled love and faith back into her life. It might even be nice. She wouldn't have the energy to move anymore if they died anyways, so she thinks she wants to be with them. The 8-year-old carefully places the scissors down and steps away. "Okay, Luffy-kun," Robin says softly. Luffy scans her eyes searchingly, before smiling and reaching up on his tiptoes to put his straw hat on her head. "Good," he nods. "Let's go to the ship and wait for Frankie." Robin's sure she looks ridiculous, outfitted in her tight, dark clothes with an old straw hat on her head, but she doesn't even dream of taking it off. She's seen him place it on others' heads, but never her own. The weight is comfortable, reassuring. It's the cement she needs to harden her resolve. So as Luffy leads them back, swinging their held hands, she fingers the worn string of his old hat and feels a small level of peace take over her soul. If they die, so will she. And she's content for the first time in 20 years. Frankie walks through the town twirling a bulky toolbox between his large hands. He can hear the other people in the streets hissing and whispering, wondering whose ship he's off to dismantle now. Frankie snorts. He wishes. For the 7th time since leaving the Frankie house he asks himself what exactly he's doing. He salvages ships, he doesn't inspect them. Normally no amount of money, even a nice chunk like 100 million, would be enough to persuade him to take on some of the duties of a shipwright again. But attached to that 100 million berry is this strange kid who's still making Frankie's head spin even hours later. He has no beeping clue what happened earlier. Some teenager appears on his doorstep. Said teen and his friend have nice, fat bounties on their heads. When Frankie and the rest of the Frankie family attempt to reel him and his friend in, the wanted man and woman proceed to beat all of them soundly. After which, he states that there are government spies in Iceberg's company, Galila. Then the teen proceeds to blandly uncover everything Frankie's tried to keep secret and safe. The teen mentions Pluton even if he can't say it right, which flips Frankie's world upside down and inside out. What really gets Frankie is that the teen mildly says that he doesn't care about the secret weapon the government has killed for. He came to Frankie so he can look at the young captain's ship because he can't trust any of the shipwrights in Water 7. Weirdest of all, the teen didn't show any malcontent. If anything, he appeared happy and delighted just to see Frankie, which, honestly, can happen to everyone on occasion when the salvager is feeling especially super. He smiled, laughed, and genuinely seemed to like Frankie, despite the fact that the salvager and the rest of his family attacked them. Straw Hat pressed again for Frankie to look at his ship. And Frankie isn't even a shipwright. Not really, not anymore, not after Tom. No one except Iceberg and Kokora should know about his past. No one should know that Frankie was once Cutty Flam, apprentice to Tom. So how does this utter stranger, who Frankie is 99% sure isn't even from Water 7, know about him? What the hell? Straw Hat has to be the most confusing, strange, and oddly straightforward person Frankie's met in his short 36 years on the world. What he should be doing is gathering his family and launching a counterstrike against Straw Hat for what he did to them. But there are too many variables. He can't. So partially out of his need to investigate both for him and that idiotic Iceberg, and partially because of his own curiosity, Frankie's on his way to check out some ship. He's going to have to speak to the mayor anyways to tell him about the government agents that may or may not have infiltrated Galila. Straw Hat has been right about too many things for Frankie to completely brush the words off, but he'd rather have more information to present. Following Nico Robin's very precise directions, he reaches an outskirt on the other side of town where, sure enough, he finds a very battered-looking ship. If he has any doubts of who it belonged to, they're cleared up as someone on the figurehead of a sheep starts jumping up and down. Frankie. It's Straw Hat who crows his name. Straw Hat. He calls back once he nears. The dark-haired boy jumps off the mast and runs right up to him. You're here. The teen captain smiles and gestures to the ship. Frankie. Meet the going Mary. Mary. Meet Frankie. He's a shipwright. Not a shipwright, a salvager, Frankie corrects, but he still smiles. He likes the way the teen talks already. Ships are one of the largest parts of any successful voyage, and Frankie's always been of the opinion that they ought to be treated that way. The ship's on the smaller side of the spectrum for a galleon, but seems sturdy enough. On the deck, he spies a handful of people. First is Nico Robin, from earlier today, who's seated on a lawn chair near the railing. She's wearing the straw hat that the team captain is known for, and even as she peers down at him from her chair, she toys with the string. Next to her on another lawn chair is a busty red-haired teen. After seeing Frankie, she stands and approaches the railing with a shrewd look. Frankie can appreciate that kind of distrust. A blonde man stands beside the redhead, alternating between ogling at the woman with gaga eyes and staring at Frankie. The salvager also thinks he can see some kind of animal aboard too, which is always nice. Frankie doesn't get to see many animals around Water 7 with how developed the city is. Straw Hat walks up the boarding platform grinning the whole time, and Frankie follows after, taking in the splintered railing and starboard as he does. Once fully aboard, Frankie sees a green-haired man he completely missed, resting against the mast. The other man's intent gaze is hard to forget once Frankie's seen it. "This is my crew, and everyone, this is Frankie, he's a shipwright," Luffy announces. "Salvager," he corrects again. He looks around the deck speculatively. "So this is your crew?" "Yeah, just about. My sharpshooter isn't here right now, he's at the bait shop. When you said you were going to check out some shipyards with Robin, we weren't really expecting you to bring someone back so soon without telling us," Red says exasperatedly before stepping forward. "I'm Nami, the navigator. This is Sanji and that's Zoro." She points to the blonde guy and the green-haired man. "And this is Chopper, our resident doctor." Nico Robin introduces the strange animal, which on further inspection, is even stranger than his first glance suggested. It's wearing a hat, and it has horns. "What? Chopper's a reindeer who ate a devil's fruit," Nami informs him, and all of them are staring at him with some strange intention Frankie can't puzzle out. Frankie just shrugs. "Cool, never seen that before, I'm going to start below deck." With that, he heads to the stairs. After setting his toolbox down, Frankie starts looking around. The tools are only in case he needs to pry something loose, or unscrew a section of this or that. There are a lot of homemade repairs done to the ship, so it's probably a good thing that he brought the kit. It's hard to determine the real state of the ship with everything boarded up. He starts examining the supports when a voice cuts him off. "What do you think?" Frankie starts and turns. "Straw Hat," he utters. "What are you doing?" "Watching you." Frankie could tell him to scat, but he kind of enjoys the way the teen looks at the ship. Even if the ship is beat to hell, and boy is it, Frankie can tell it's well cared for. Besides, it would be a lie to say he isn't still curious about the teen. "All right," he says. "Just keep out of my way while I'm working. I don't want to miss anything." "Right." Straw Hat smiles. "How long have you had the going merry?" Frankie asks as he catalogs some cracks in the supporting beams. Maybe 7 or 8 months. Less than a year." Frankie raises an eyebrow before digging around his toolbox for a crowbar. "Well, the Grand Line is the most dangerous of all the seas. We sailed her here all the way from the East Blue. We took her up Reverse Mountain and everything. I've heard that's pretty hard on a lot of ships," Frankie comments as he starts prying away a piece of plywood from the hull. Small beads of water slowly well up into the ship when the board moves. Frankie sighs before placing the plywood back over the mess of cracks it was covering. He gives it a good thump to get the nails set back in before moving on. Mary took it well. Luffy follows him as Frankie moves to another part of the hull. "We got a lot of this damage recently. Some big naval battle?" Frankie asks, sighing at the patchwork mess of wood covering what Frankie is sure is another large wound in the Going Mary's hull. Hopefully Straw Hat has another couple 100 million berry lying around after paying Frankie, otherwise this ship isn't going to get the multiple repairs it needs to continue on for a long while more. "No, we didn't have a battle. It doesn't really look like you all were attacked," Frankie amends, considering the kinds of damage he's seen. "Harsh waters. Something like that." Straw Hat scratches his uncovered head. "We took Mary up." Frankie frowns. "Up to Skypia. It's this neat island in the sky." Frankie stops his final sweep of the hull to stare at the teen. "An island in the sky? Yep, we had to take this knock upstream to get there. And we sort of fell for the most part back down. That's why Mary is as hurt as she is. There wasn't a lot we could do about it." A ship is supposed to take us to dangerous places so we can explore and adventure. Sometimes the ship gets hurt for that. Straw Hat sighs. I don't like it, but I think I've learned by now that it just sort of happens. Frankie nods. Yep, but can you explain to me this island in the sky a little more? I'm kind of still caught up on that. Yeah, Straw Hat smiles and starts explaining in these outlandish, rambling sentences about angels and a strange false god who was apparently really rude and mean to everyone there. Straw Hat seems to think he's telling the truth, and even if he isn't, the salvager doesn't much care. Frankie can appreciate a good story for what it is. And the fact that Straw Hat, though confusing, is a very engaged and excited storyteller makes it even better. Frankie finds himself laughing with this strange team captain as he explains how the green-haired guy apparently gets lost like it's nobody's business. How the blonde and the swordsman fight over stupid things, how Chopper apparently patches all of them up after their fights and tries to keep them bedridden until one of them can get some beer to loosen the reindeer up enough to let them go, how the sharpshooter apparently suffers from a strange disease that puzzles Straw Hat called I can't go to that island-itis, how the navigator tends to crack skulls when she's had enough, and how Nico Robin smiles and watches. Straw Hat talks about his crewmates with so much enthusiasm and affection, it's a little stunning and poignant for Frankie. It isn't like he starts crying or anything like that. He doesn't cry, even when captains tell really emotionally touching stories. And Straw Hat laughs at his behavior and says, "Of course not. But you're really funny." It's odd and borderline uncomfortable how much it seems like Straw Hat already knows him. It's not just the obscure secret knowledge either, it's just how he responds and talks to Frankie. Frankie would almost think he'd met the team before. Unfortunately, all that lightheartedness fades when Frankie starts examining the keel. Straw Hat falls silent, sensing the change in the mood and waits patiently for Frankie to speak. "You were right." Frankie sighs. "She isn't seaworthy. The keel's broken. I'm sorry, but this ship is done for. You aren't going to be able to repair damage like this. To be honest, it's a miracle you made it this far." Straw Hat's lips purse and his eyes are suspiciously wet, but he nods determinedly. Okay. After saying that, the captain presses himself against one of the beams and closes his eyes. Frankie slowly packs up his stuff, careful to keep his attention on his toolbox so that Straw Hat can have a moment with the ship. After a long time, Straw Hat finally pulls himself away. "Let's tell everyone else." "Right," Frankie says, grabbing his toolbox and going to the upper deck. Though their eyes flicker towards him, none of the Straw Hat pirates stop what they're doing. Until their captain steps on the upper deck, everything stills, and all of them stand and move closer to him, as though gravitating to a pain they can innately sense. "Luffy," Nami asks, "is the inspection done already?" The blonde asks, "Surely you have more to look at." Frankie steels himself. "Inspection's done, I'm afraid. The Mary can't be fixed," Luffy says, cutting him off. Frankie pauses, again surprised by the team captain. He was more than ready to tell them the bad news. And yet Straw Hat steps forward and takes the burden on himself, takes their shocked and unhappy stares. "What do you mean she can't be fixed?" Nami demands. "The Mary can't be fixed," Straw Hat says again. "Are you sure?" the doctor asks, eyes wide. "Yeah," the captain answers. We have to say goodbye to the Mary." "No way. What's wrong with her that you don't think someone can repair?" Nami asks the salvager. Frankie is ready to step in and help the young captain. "The keel is cracked." The keel is debatably the most important part of a ship. It runs along the bottom of the ship as the main support. Without a decent keel, it's only a matter of time until the Going Mary sinks. "Can't you just replace the keel?" Nami asks. Frankie shakes his head. "It doesn't work like that. You can replace every other section of a ship if you want, but to repair or switch out a keel you have to take apart the entire ship and start from the bottom up. Once that's done it isn't really your ship anymore. Putting it back together is basically impossible. I know it would be hard, but can't you rebuild it with a new keel?" she asks, desperately. "You can't make another copy of a ship," Frankie says, unable to keep the irritation from his voice. "Every ship has its own nuances and quirks, its own spirit. Besides, without the original blueprints it's impossible to rebuild a replica in the first place. You'd be better off buying a new ship." Buying a new ship, Chopper asks, dazed. Hold on, I want to see your credentials. Luffy, how do you know this guy is trustworthy? Red just does not give up. He usually likes stubbornness, but this kind of denial leaves a bad taste in his mouth. He's ready to blow this joint. Frankie doesn't have to explain himself to her. I trust him, Luffy says decisively. Frankie tenses. If Straw Hat lets loose his secrets to everyone on board, Frankie doesn't know what he's going to do. Nico Robin is bad enough. Why? Not my business to say. Straw Hat shrugs. Frankie slowly, uneasily relaxes his tensed muscles. But I know we can trust him. Luffy. Look. Luffy's luck is uncanny. I don't doubt that he managed to find a great carpenter after being in the city for an hour. Let up. Zoro pipes in for the first time. Red looks like she wants to argue, but just huffs an upset breath and leaves it be. Thank you for your help. You've given us much to think on. Nico Robin smiles. He nearly jumps in surprise as a trail of hands appear on the deck. A briefcase is passed along from somewhere inside the galley and presented to him. Frankie blinks at the delivery, but accepts it. Sure thing. After a quick peek inside the briefcase to confirm the contents, he gives an awkward wave to the now solemn crew before adjusting his sunglasses and walking off the platform. See you later, Straw Hat says. Whatever, he replies easily. To be perfectly honest, Frankie doesn't think he wants to deal with that strange crew again if he can help it. They're unusual people for sure and he likes them, especially their impressive captain, but they are possibly too strange, which Frankie has never really thought about any person or thing before. He sighs. Whatever they do, he wishes them the best. The salvager has other things to look forward to anyways. Frankie rolls his shoulders. He should meet with Iceberg sooner rather than later, but he can hardly stand the idea of having 100 million berry untouched in a briefcase for an entire day. One party and a few shopping sprees, then Frankie will visit that idiot of a mayor. This evening is going to be super. Zoro eyes the tense and unhappy figures on the deck. The game plan for Water 7 has changed drastically and suddenly. All of them are trying to adjust to the new information. It wasn't something they had discussed, the possibility that the Going Merry might not be able to be fixed. The way Zoro understands the situation, it's simply bad luck that they damaged probably the only irreparable part of the ship. Now that they know this, Zoro isn't sure as to what Luffy will do. He said they'd buy a new ship, but how is Luffy going to convince everyone else to agree? Speaking of, the Queen of Disagreement makes a short sound of unhappiness. Luffy, Nami says determinedly. I'm not giving up on the Merry so quickly. It isn't necessarily quickly, is it, Captain? Robin puts forth. What do you mean, Robin Schwan? The chef asks. Luffy-kun suspected that the Going Merry was irreparably damaged, didn't you? Luffy sighs and looks at the figurehead unhappily. Yeah. How? Usopp didn't think so and he spends more time fixing the Merry than anyone. Chopper exclaims. Can't you see? Luffy asks distantly, closing his eyes. The Merry's so sad, she knows she won't be able to keep going with us. I see her spirit sometimes. And it's so wonderful and sad. He opens his dark eyes. But she shouldn't be sad because she brought us here. And that's good. That's really good. His words create a miserable hush over the present crew members, and all of them look solemnly at the ship, trying to divine the truth that's seemingly so evident to their captain. Zoro himself is trying to see the spirit Luffy's talking about. Metaphors just aren't his captain's style. If Luffy says there's a spirit on the ship, Zoro doesn't doubt its actual existence. Luffy's words are always honest, always full of firmness, almost to a point of fault. In this instance though, Zoro thinks it's what they all need in order to grasp this new information. Not everyone is on that page. Nami slowly speaks. I'm sure Frankie is a good shipwright, and that you can sense the Merry better than us, but can't we go to Galila for a second opinion? Everyone in town said they're the best company around. No, Luffy says plainly. There are government spies at Galila who are after Robin, so I don't want to go there. There's a 3-second pause. What? Almost all of them shout and stare at their captain in utter bewilderment. How do you know that? Nami asks. Are they going to try and hurt Robin Schwan? I won't let them. Sanji rails. Zoro just glances between his captain and the complex-looking Robin, whose fingers have yet to leave the string of the straw hat since she came back aboard. He noticed, like all of them did, that she was wearing their captain's hat after coming back from their trip to the city. That usually means that some shit is going down somehow. After Luffy started talking about this utterly bizarre cyborg they ran into, Zoro sort of figured that whatever business was going on with Robin wasn't too important, just an emotional exchange or something. Evidently, he was wrong. Since he began sailing with Luffy, this isn't an irregular experience anymore. Robin's not going anywhere, Luffy says seriously. Why are their agents after her? Chopper asks in a small voice. That's a long story. We'll talk about it later. She's safe for now. They won't do anything for a little while I think, Luffy muses aloud. Right now, I think we should start saying goodbye to the Mary. If she's safe. Sanji trails off, bordering dubious. If anyone else had said it, Sanji probably would have challenged them to ensure the safety of the lady. As it is, Zoro understands why he doesn't. Saying goodbye to the Mary. It's too sudden, Luffy, Nami says, almost pleadingly. I don't want to say goodbye to the Mary, Chopper says, beginning to sniffle. None of us want to, Zoro says, though he's careful to keep his tone gentle for the young doctor. But this is ultimately the captain's choice. Luffy, Nami beseeches. Luffy takes a deep breath. We're going after our dreams. If we're going to keep sailing, we have to say goodbye to the Mary. When Chopper chokes on a sob, Luffy goes over and places a hand on top of the doctor's hat. She's sad because she can't go on, but I can tell she's happy she got to go all the way here with us. Besides, it's not like we're ever going to forget her, right? Chopper wipes the water from his eyes. Never. Exactly. When we reach our dreams, she's gonna be on our minds, and it'll be like she's with us too. It's not really goodbye. The doctor manages a smile and nod at that. Luffy pats the pink hat and steps back. Zoro gives a small grin. Even as sadness takes root in everyone's eyes, acceptance is there too. Luffy's incredible empathy and understanding strikes again. I'm back. Every crew member on deck freezes in unison and slowly turns towards the sharpshooter who's making his way up the boarding platform, arms laden with bags. The bait here is pretty expensive, but it's high-quality stuff. I'm ready to catch another few sea kings. Usopp pauses once he reaches the deck. What's wrong? Why are all of you so serious? Usopp. Nami trails off. No one is looking forward to explaining the Going Mary's condition to her most fervent fan. Let's go to the galley, Luffy says. We need to talk about the Mary. Usopp hesitates for a moment before shrugging. Alright, let me just set my bait down. Once he puts the bait in their cabinet for fishing supplies, he walks into the galley and everyone slowly filters in after. Before entering, Luffy approaches Robin, who, after a moment of staring, removes their captain's straw hat and returns it to its owner. Hat firmly on his head, Luffy goes in. The archaeologist and swordsman enter last, shutting the door behind them. Usopp's in one of the chairs against the wall and Luffy takes a seat on top of the table. For once the cook doesn't bother scolding him. Zoro leans against the wall by the door to wait and watch. He has no intention of stepping in. Besides, he's curious how Luffy is going to handle this. So, what's up with the Mary? Usopp asks. From the looks on all of your faces, I'm guessing the repairs are going to be expensive. Usopp. Luffy asks seriously. Do you value your Nakama or the Mary more? Everyone beeps in a silent breath at Luffy's chosen line of inquiry. Zoro knows that Usopp is going to take it the hardest out of all of them, but it seems like Luffy is preparing for the absolute worst. Usopp wouldn't put the Mary first, would he? Even for the chronic liar, that would be too much, right? While the Mary is a precious gift from Kaya, it's still a ship. But, the more he considers the matter, the less certain Zoro is. The sharpshooter blinks before frowning. Isn't Mary Nakama? She is, Luffy agrees. I would fight to save the Mary. I would fight like my life depends on it. But I wouldn't save her at the cost of the entire crew. Would you? Zoro's stomach clenches unpleasantly when Usopp hedges. Why are you asking? The Mary can't be fixed. The statement hangs tensely in the air. What do you mean? I know she's a bit more beat up than usual, but she's still in one piece. Usopp exclaims. It'll be expensive, but there's no way she's beyond repair. We had someone inspect her, Luffy says. The Mary can't be fixed. Usopp blinks wildly, seeming unable to reconcile this sudden rush of information. You're trusting the words of a stranger over Mary's spirit. I know her better than anyone. If these strangers aren't willing to rebuild the Mary, then I will. This isn't something you can repair. The keel is broken, Luffy explains. Without the keel, we can't fix her. They'd have to rebuild her from scratch. Then let's rebuild her, Usopp demands. I don't care what it'll cost. And you shouldn't either, the Mary is special. I thought you knew that, but maybe you don't with how quickly you're giving up on her. Calm down, Usopp, Nami requests. Just hear Luffy out. I will if he starts making sense. The Luffy I know wouldn't give up on the Mary like this, Usopp rebuts with a furious look in his eyes. We can't rebuild her. She won't be our Mary, their captain says, frustrated. And we don't have the original blueprints to make a replica anyways. Usopp, we can't. How are we standing on her right now if she's too broken to be fixed? Exclamation mark quote. Usopp shouts. I'm not going to give up on the Mary without at least trying to fix her keel. Zoro takes a breath and exhales slowly. Luffy's perception in this instance is absolutely spot on. Zoro knows Usopp loves the Mary, but the way he's talking makes it seem like he isn't willing to part with her regardless of the dire circumstances. The sharpshooter is utterly irrational in this instance, and the first mate can tell this will end badly. You aren't a shipwright, Luffy says through gritted teeth. Nami steps towards him. Wait, Luffy, he just doesn't understand. Usopp cuts her off. No matter how hard, I'm going to try fixing the Mary. I refuse to give up on her. You can't fix her keel. Luffy snaps. The Mary is broken. So you're going to leave her behind? Usopp accuses. She's going to sink, Luffy shouts. As a ship, it's her duty to carry us to our destination safely. If she can't, she won't be happy. Just like I'm the captain. I'm willing to die for the crew. If I let my Nakama die, I wouldn't be worthy of being the captain anymore. I know Mary feels the same. So, what, if I'm not fulfilling my duty of sharpshooter, you'll leave me behind too? Usopp demands. It isn't the same. Luffy shakes his head jerkily. The Mary and I are in charge of the crew's safety. As a captain, it's my duty. If I'm not capable of defending my crew, then I have no right to be the captain. He levels his eyes on Zoro. The swordsman grits his teeth. Because both of them are thinking about their first encounter. If you ever get between me and my dream, I won't hesitate to cut you down. How far away they are from that place now. By this point, Zoro will never question whether his captain will put his dream above any of theirs. He didn't understand at the time what all Luffy really is. And even now, he's realizing that there is still so much about his captain's determined spirit that he hasn't grasped yet. I don't care. I'm not abandoning this ship. Usopp grabs Luffy's collar angrily. I underestimated each of you, but you especially, Luffy. You don't believe in the Mary at all, do you? You stand here spouting bull about being captain and a captain's duty and a ship's duty. Just shut up. You don't get to decide things like that. I'm the captain. It's my job to make hard choices like this, Luffy shoots back. Well, I don't accept it. Usopp shakes the other teen. We are getting a new ship no matter what you say. I made that decision. I won't sail on and leave a wounded Nakama behind. Mary is Nakama, but she's a ship. Their captain says. No, she's not. Usopp shakes his head furiously. She's a person too. She isn't just a ship. So that's your answer then? You pick the Mary over the crew? Luffy asks. Zoro understands now why Luffy opened up with that question. The swordsman didn't realize the extent of Usopp's feelings for the ship, not like Luffy apparently did. I choose not to leave a Nakama behind, Usopp answers instead. Luffy's eyes harden. If you can't agree, then you can just get your stuff and... You jackass! Sanji shouts as he kicks both of them into the walls and floor. For once, Luffy doesn't dodge the idiot cook's attack. What were you about to say? Don't speak so carelessly. If he expects to cow Luffy, he's sorely mistaken, because when Luffy lifts his head, his eyes are only more resolute. I'm not speaking carelessly, he says lowly as he pulls himself from the broken wood. This isn't something I'm saying lightly. Luffy stares at each of them, making eye contact with every member of his crew before resting on Sanji, and the cook actually flinches. His gaze flips to Usopp. I won't let you stay on the crew so long as you value a ship over everyone's lives. You want us to stay on the Mary and sail to our deaths. As a captain, I will never let you do that. If you can't respect that, then leave. Sanji staggers back and nearly all of them have tears in their eyes. This is what you wanted all along, Usopp utters. You've just been looking for a reason to get rid of me. I'm useless like the Mary, so trim the fat, leave me behind too. It's what you want, isn't it? Usopp. Chopper sniffs and pulls his hat over his eyes. Does it look like I want this? Luffy demands. And no one in the room will argue that he wants any of what's happening. I don't want you to leave, but when you disregard everyone's lives like this, I don't want you on my crew. Usopp's eyes are wild with anger and actual hate. Well, our goals never lined up anyways, did they? Beyond sailing together, we don't have any ties. So I'll do it then. I'm leaving the crew, Usopp declares. Grabbing his messenger bag, Usopp rises and storms out the door without a single look back. And just like that, he's leaving the crew. Luffy, what are you waiting for? Go get him back, Nami shouts. I know this is serious, but don't do something you're going to regret. Sanji says. Chopper is still crying. Go after him, please. Luffy says nothing, even as Chopper, Nami, and Sanji run through the door onto the outer deck. Zoro's respect for his captain has shot up incredibly. To be frank, he didn't know if Luffy had the guts to seriously reprimand a crewmate. They disrespect him often, and Luffy lets them walk all over him regularly. He cares about them a lot, and doesn't put much stock in pride, and that's all there is to it. Because he's Luffy, he has their respect for his captaincy anyways, even though he hardly acts the part. So to see him challenge Usopp for his stubbornness and selfishness is incredibly impressive to the swordsman. Luffy. The captain adjusts his hat so it shadows his eyes before he walks out the door to see what Usopp is yelling about. Zoro and Robin file outside after him. Looking out into the orange-bathed landscape, Zoro sees the sharpshooter a little away from the Mary, staring challengingly towards the team captain. Since you're the captain, the Mary belongs to you, Luffy. So there's only one thing I can do about it. He beeps in a deep breath. Luffy, I challenge you. I'll return here at 10 o'clock to fight you for the Mary. Usopp, don't do this. Chopper bawls. Luffy, do something. Nami demands. This is between myself and your captain, Usopp says. Do you accept? Luffy answers tersely. No. Usopp shrieks. Thank you, Luffy. Nami smiles with relief. Now get back here now, Usopp. We can talk this out. But Luffy isn't done. No, I won't fight you. We're leaving the Mary, she's yours. Sanji, Nami, Chopper, and Usopp's mouths all fall open, and even Zoro admits to being surprised. The sharpshooter is livid. I won't just accept her like that. Then leave her here on her own. We aren't staying here anymore, Luffy says with determination. Just fight me. Their captain crosses his arms. No, I won't. You can't make me. With that, he turns away from Usopp. Come on, everyone, let's gather our stuff together. Nami, I'll help you with your mic and trees. Oi, Luffy, you can't be serious. Sanji says. We're leaving the ship anyways, remember. Zoro finally steps in. Whether we do it now or later, it doesn't matter. Usopp's made his choice and so has Luffy. We should respect that. Usopp snaps. Don't ignore me, Luffy. Chopper, once you have most of the medical supplies taken care of, help Robin with her books, Zoro says. There should be enough crates in the back. I'll get the flag, Luffy announces solemnly, and his words echo in all of their ears. He pulls back an arm, but before he can launch to the mast, one of Usopp's pop bullets speeds towards his head. The captain catches it easily. The bullet explodes, but Luffy doesn't flinch or react. He lets it crackle and ooze smoke through his clenched fingers. When it finishes, Luffy drops the remnants of the bullet to the deck. Chopper immediately runs over, prying his fingers open. He's not the only one stunned to see Luffy's hand is undamaged. There's no time to ask or comment, because the team captain finally turns to face Usopp. I challenged you, Luffy. The sharpshooter shouts. Your influence on my decisions stopped the moment you left the crew, Luffy says with a hard expression. I don't want to fight you. I'm not going to. There's nothing you can do about it. Damn. Luffy is serious. The kind of serious he only uses on enemies and people who threaten his nakama. That's really what it comes down to for Luffy, isn't it? And of everything Luffy's said, this seems to be what hits Usopp the hardest. Zoro understands why perfectly. Because Luffy isn't dismissive, doesn't ignore them. It becomes crystal clear that Usopp really has no idea the hurt his words inflicted on their captain, the weight in them, how serious what he's done is. Zoro finds himself supporting his captain without reservation. Usopp has gone too far without understanding the consequences of his actions. Fine, Usopp says through sobs, forearm flung over his eyes. I guess our relationship ends here. Good riddance. Goodbye. Luffy's hand grips the brim of his hat tightly. It was fun, and tears slip down from his shadowed eyes. Every cry, every plea, and every accusation drains from Chopper, Nami, and Sanji's mouths when they see the water running over Luffy's face. Come on, we should get started, Zoro says, nudging the tearful reindeer into motion. Luffy wipes his tears away and takes Nami's hand before pulling her stunned form to the Mykan Grove. Sanji finishes off his last cigarette and immediately lights a second one before heading into the galley, while Robin slowly goes up the stairs to the library. No one is okay, but they're packing up so they can move on, which is the first step to getting over what just happened. Though Zoro suspects it'll be a long while until anyone gets closure. Sanji looks out at the dark city from the window in their temporary room. After renting a storage pod and emptying all of their possessions into it, they went to the nearest hotel to rest. All of them need it. Today has been an utter tidal wave of emotions. First when they learned about the Mary's complete disrepair, and then Luffy's confrontation with Usopp. The chef's teeth grit. Usopp was in the wrong, no doubt about it. The more Sanji thinks about it, the more apparent that becomes. In the end, the sharpshooter blatantly chose the Mary over the safety of the crew, which does hurt. Sanji gets why that upsets Luffy so much, but he doesn't like how their captain phrased that question. Ultimatums aren't very appealing to Sanji. But to anyone else on the crew, that question would have been a no-brainer. Luffy seemed like he already knew how Usopp would react, which is why he should have been the bigger man, waited to cool off before proposing that Usopp leave the crew, of all things. Sanji remembers many of the stories Zeph told him when he was a child, back when it was just a kitchen, ingredients, an old peg-legged man, and a stubborn child. From what the old chef told him, Sanji figured that a crew is a fleeting thing. Members come and go on every pirate ship, it's a fact of life. Disagreements happen or better prospects come up, whatever the case is, and crew members leave. But Luffy's existence is an utter upheaval of every one of Sanji's preconceptions of pirates, of everything, really. The impermanence of a crew shouldn't be any different. Maybe Sanji's gotten spoiled or overly dazzled by the magic Luffy seems to bring to every facet of their crew. Their captain has always instilled within them a feeling of uniqueness. They are sailing for dreams, it's what sets them apart from nearly every other pirate crew out there. Connected through dreams and unsatisfying childhoods, their crew is supposed to be unbreakable compared to others. It's part of why their crew will never be too large. This is a lifetime dedication. And what a good way to spend a lifetime. It had never occurred to Sanji that one of their crew members could ever leave, not after knowing Luffy and the life he offers. But apparently, he's been doubly wrong. Not only did Usopp leave, but Robin apparently was almost kidnapped from them too. The ground feels suddenly unsteady beneath Sanji's feet and he wants to stamp and jump on it until it stops. Luffy was there to stop her, thankfully, before she was pulled away. Even though their captain missed Usopp, catching Robin rather makes up for it, at least in Sanji's book. Still, things like this aren't supposed to happen. He agrees that Luffy is vindicated in his dismissal of Usopp when he treats their lives like trash compared to his obsession with the Mary. But Luffy's supposed to be able to just fix things like this. He always does. Sanji smiles humorlessly to himself. Spoiled indeed. It seems maybe he's taken that magic touch for granted. At the same time, he hasn't fully given up hope. Because, ironic as it is to say after admitting to being dazzled, if anyone could mend this mess of a breakup, it's Luffy. And Sanji thinks maybe childish as it is that he still trusts his captain to do that. He is pathetic, isn't he? A knock sounds at the door, startling the chef from his thoughts. Sanji, Chopper calls. Nami's back from the concierge desk. I'll be right there. Sanji lights his 7th cigarette for the day and throws the empty carton in the trash. After a deep inhale, Sanji stands and prepares to face what he's sure will be another unsettling conversation. Exiting the men's room, he goes down one door and knocks. Come in, Nami's beautiful voice entreats him. Sanji happily obeys. The entire crew, aside from Usopp, is assembled in the ladies' room. Nami and Robin are perched on one of the beds while Luffy and Chopper sit at the table. Ever uncouth, Zoro's leaning against the wall. Sanji makes a short sound of annoyance before taking the third seat at the table, angling it towards the women. Sanji does his best to avoid staring at the two beds that Nami and Robin will be sprawled across in a few hours, innocently and unconscious, exposed to the dark caress of night and her sensual shadows. He jerks himself out of his very occupying thoughts. As the one who demanded they have this conversation tonight, he should probably pay attention. All right, so what's going on? Zoro begins, gruff as ever. Before we start, may I ask you something? Robin addresses their captain. What? He asks. Luffy-kun, what you said to Usopp, the same applies to me, does it not? She asks, maybe even challenges. I'm a danger to the crew, so I should leave too. Sanji barely holds his shout of denial back. Never, she could never be a burden. If Luffy even proposes kicking Robin, his beautiful nymph, off the crew, Sanji will be the next to leave. Before he can accuse their captain and assure Robin, Luffy's speaking. Robin, do you want us to die? Sanji only resists scoffing. She would never. As for the woman in question, she merely remains silent. Do you want us to risk our lives? Luffy asks. Her tempting lips remain still, like perfect statues. Do you want us to leave you behind to keep us safe? Robin gives the smallest of nods, merely a subtle tilt of her head, and Luffy smiles. That's the difference. You aren't dangerous to the crew. You aren't risking our lives. We're risking them because you are our nakama. None of us are going to knowingly sail to our deaths because Usopp can't handle saying goodbye to the Mary. That isn't friendship, it's stubbornness. It's bad even, because he wants us to hurt ourselves. I don't like that. Sanji agrees with their silly captain. Robin would never want them to hurt themselves needlessly. Actually, she'd never want them to hurt themselves for her even if it was necessary. From what the chef's seen, she strays to the self-sacrificing side of the spectrum, just as her caring, benevolent disposition suggests. All right, she says, smiling softly. Luffy takes his straw hat off his head and tosses it across the room to Robin, who catches it with the aid of one of her flower hands. Give it back to me when we leave Water 7, okay? She holds the hat carefully in her hands and nods. Sanji smiles. If there's a guaranteed way to ensure someone doesn't leave, it's by making them responsible for returning Luffy's treasure. Why are you in danger, Robin? Chopper asks. Cypher Police 9, better known as CP9, the archaeologist begins. Created by the government to be one of the most elite and secretive operations, the members are trained from an early age for espionage and assassination. They handle only the most serious criminals and threats to the world government. And they're after you, Chopper utters with wide eyes. Why? Sanji asks. How could anyone want to hurt someone so incredibly kind and perfect? He irritably taps his cigarette on the edge of the ashtray in the center of the table. The world government has been after me for some time, Robin admits. As a child, they pinned an 80 million bounty on my head. That's a little over the top, Zoro says. Robin shrugs. I have the capacity to be a rather large threat to them, but I truly have no interest in upsetting the order of things. All I want is to be left alone, truly. So these CP9 people are in Water 7? Zoro asks. Earlier we ran into an undercover agent in the streets. They only came to intimidate me into joining, no real harm was done. Here Robin pauses. According to Luffy-kun, CP9 has infiltrated the Galila shipbuilding company. I'm still uncertain as to why they would go there. What is their purpose, Captain? Luffy hums. The bad guys want Play-Doh. What? Sanji asks, bewildered. Luffy-kun, what is Play-Doh? Robin inquires intently. Oh, I keep saying it wrong, huh? Luffy scratches his head. Playdon, Pluto. Luffy. Robin gasps, actually gasps. Are you talking about Pluton? That's it, he smiles. It's this super bad weapon the evil guys want. A super bad weapon, huh? Sanji reiterates. Something about the glib way Luffy says that makes Sanji worry it's a complete and total understatement. It has the power to destroy the world, Robin explains stunned. Sanji coughs and splutters at her words. Everyone else displays similar reactions of shock, except Luffy, who apparently already knew this. Robin never speaks flippantly, so if she says it can destroy the world, Sanji is going to start preparing rations for the apocalypse. An understatement indeed. What does this have to do with Robin though? Nami asks after she gets over her shock. They want Robin because she can read pony gifs, Luffy explains. Poneglyphs, the archaeologist corrects, still a little dazed. Weren't those the things that Robin was after in Alabasta? After turning in Mr. 2, King Nefertari had nodded and led her to some secret cave where there were poneglyphs, apparently. Though Sanji doesn't know how, the poneglyphs tie back to Robin's dream to discover the truth about the Void Century. Her ambitious dream is truly a-weeing. Yeah, Iceberg, he's the mayor and he runs Galila too. They think he has the instructions for the Play-Doh because he studied under Tom. Pluton, Robin corrects. What she said. He doesn't though. Frankie does. The shipwright from this afternoon. Nami demands, confused. Oh, Robin utters, and Sanji can see the puzzle pieces coming together in her beautiful mind. Okay, so what do we do now? Zoro asks their captain. Sleep, idiot. About CP9, Sanji shouts with shark teeth. I'm serious, he whines. Right now they're waiting for Robin to turn herself in, which she won't. They might send one of two more people to try and persuade her. After that, they'll probably attack us. We'll fight back and protect Robin. If they figure out Frankie has the blueprints, then I want to help him too. He's gonna be our shipwright. Nami blinks. That was too logical. Sanji shakes his head. Chopper, will you check for a fever? I'm fine. Seriously though, Luffy, how do you know all of this? Nami asks. You've never been to Water 7 before, have you? Well, Luffy pauses. I have. When? Sanji asks. In another lifetime. Sanji moves forward to kick the idiot, but as ever, he ducks out of the way. Shitty captain. If you aren't going to answer seriously, don't answer at all. Luffy smiles mysteriously, and it's ridiculous that someone as dense and simple as Luffy can be cryptic and enigmatic before declaring he's going to sleep. That's when Luffy starts lying down on the ground in the ladies' room. Idiot, what are you doing? Sanji snaps. You can't sleep here. Nami tells him. I am. What's wrong with the other room? Robin asks. You aren't in it. His subtly suggestive words slice through the noise and leave them all staring in an utterly bamboozled and almost frightened silence. I have to protect you, he continues, and everyone in the room lets out a sigh of relief. You can do it from the men's cabin, Nami says sternly. But Luffy is staring at Robin in that blank, intense way he tends to. Robin blinks, before slowly nodding. Please take one of my pillows. The beautiful, dark-haired woman offers a pillow to the stupid captain who smiles and accepts the gift he doesn't deserve to receive. Thanks. Don't make Robin Schwan give you one of her pillows. Sanji snatches it and presents it back to Robin with a flourish before stalking over to the men's room and grabbing one of their pillows. Take this, you idiot. Luffy laughs. Okay, thanks Sanji. Idiot, he reiterates under his breath. As unhappy as he is, he knows when he's lost a fight. Without Robin and Nami arguing, Sanji doesn't have much ground to stand on. Maybe tomorrow he should ask to stand guard over their gorgeous, serene figures, and be able to watch their perfect skin shimmer in the moonlight. When Sanji and the other men are startled awake by the sounds of crashing glass from next door, and go over to see Luffy beating the snot out of a dark-clad assailant, Sanji decides to add more meat to breakfast tomorrow. From me to you, you all have new bounties. A member of the Frankie family starts laying out the sheets of paper, showing all of the straw hats. The crew and several members of the Frankie family are spread out in the entryway of the bungalow. Chopper smiles eagerly until he sees the amount under his name. What? Only 50 berry? Chopper exclaims. What? Only 300 million berry? Luffy cries out from beside him. Idiot, don't be upset about something like that. The higher your bounty is, the more the Marines are going to be after us, Nami scolds. It's already bad enough that I have a bounty now too. Oh God. Mine's only 50 berry, Chopper shouts. How can you be upset with 300 million? While Chopper admits he doesn't know the bounty system on the sea very well, he's sure 300 million is a nice bounty. It should be bigger. Luffy pouts. I'm really strong, and at this rate I'm never going to catch up to Ace. Your bounty doubled and you took out a government syndicate, Zoro tells their captain. That isn't enough for you. It tripled last time, Luffy mutters. Chopper wants to yell at the captain some more, but as a doctor, he really should check on Sanji and see if he's going to recover from his sudden depressive episode. Sanji doesn't really have a right to be upset with a 70 million berry bounty, even if the drawn picture isn't exactly flattering. It isn't like he got called a pet of all things. Chopper actually kind of wants to join Sanji in the corner where he's sulking, but someone has to be an adult here. Don't worry, Sanji, I'm sure they'll get a picture for the next poster when your bounty increases, Chopper says. Even with Luffy, that'll take a few months at least. Sanji moans. And all the while the beautiful Melorine will see this atrocity. Speaking it out loud seems to have beeped his strength in a strange phenomenon Chopper attributes to psychological issues embedded deeply in the chef's psyche that the doctor should probably analyze one of these days. But for now, Sanji just collapses to the ground on his knees. Chopper winces as he pats the chef's back with his hoof. Sanji really shouldn't be resting on his knees. His legs were damaged more seriously than usual, but considering they were up against a syndicate of specialized government assassins, Chopper thinks it's fair. That last battle was their hardest yet. They had been prepared to fight the members of CP9, Chopper never realized how seriously strong they were. Even though everything ended up going the way Luffy said it would, 4 members of CP9 attacking them at the hotel and effectively destroying a large part of downtown Water 7 as they all spread out in their separate fights, all of them got hurt. Even Luffy, who's barely gotten a scratch the entire adventure. To be fair, apparently Lucci was the strongest member in the history of CP9, but still. Admittedly it wasn't that much damage, nothing like what Sanji and Zoro got. Nobody's wounds were anything too damaging though, and they wouldn't have become so serious, except after CP9 fled the scene, with only Lucci and Fukuro getting fully KO'd. Frankie came running up to them and asked for their help breaking into the headquarters of Galula. Apparently, Frankie was having a secret meeting with Iceberg when the mayor was assaulted by his secretary and one of his foremen. The salvager irritably raved that Iceberg then pushed him out of the window, leaving him stunned from his sudden freefall from the 25th floor. The agents of CP9 locked down the building, and it seemed like there was nothing that Frankie could do, and in that moment, Chopper supposes Luffy came to mind, which isn't so surprising. Something about his captain seems to leave the impression that he's willing and able to help people make things better. Although some of the Straw Hat members were rather beat up, when Frankie asked for their help with desperate eyes that screamed he had no one else he could turn to, Zoro shook off Chopper's attending hooves and stood up, stubborn and determined. Sanji grabbed his coat jacket, Robin carefully wiped away the blood from the scrapes on her face, and Nami pulled out her Klima tact. And Luffy wasn't making assumptions on any of their opinions when he agreed to come and help. So everyone got a bit more battered from their second round with the CP9 agents, but they were successful. They saved the mayor's life and gained Frankie's eternal gratitude. And that gratitude manifested itself in the now self-identified shipwright volunteering to build them what he claimed would be one of the strongest, most amazing ships on sea. Beyond that, the mayor offered them a house by the sea to rest in, which all of them are currently occupying. And beyond that, Iceberg volunteered to help Frankie personally, so both of Tom's workers are currently piecing together a ship for Chopper and his crew. Their life is sometimes a little stunning to the doctor. Next time a group like that tries to take away or hurt one of our Nakama, let's declare war on the world government. Luffy nods to himself, seeming intent to increase his bounty. No, Chopper yells in a chorus with nearly everyone else. Robin, seated at a nearby table, chuckles at their antics. Chopper really likes it when she laughs now. He liked it before, but now the sound is much lighter and more melodic. Everything about the archaeologist is like that since CP9 got taken out. Her default mild smile reaches a deeper level in her eyes that Chopper didn't know existed. It's nice. It feels like Robin, all of Robin, belongs to them now. Even Nami has let up on her subtle dislike. In Robin's lap is Luffy's straw hat, which she still hasn't returned, and he hasn't asked for yet, apparently. Whenever they go outside, Robin puts it on her head to avoid the bright sun, and in those moments she looks like she's glowing. Fine, but on our next adventure we have to take out a Shichibukai then, Luffy compromises. We're not doing that either. Luffy laughs heartily at their outrage. Wait, maybe we should, Sanji says with sudden vigor. That will send our bounties up, surely. New posters will have to be sent out. Stop it, you'll jinx us, Nami snaps. Honestly, you two, you're. The front wall explodes, sending rubble and wood flying into the room. After bracing themselves from the sudden onslaught of debris and shaking off the surprise, everyone tenses, staring at the newly made opening with anticipation and some fear. When the dust and dirt kicked up from the small explosion clears, they all see an older man wearing a marine uniform. Zoro places his hands on his swords, and Chopper prepares to shift forms if he needs to. The doctor glances towards their captain to see how he intends to deal with the situation. Chopper does a double take at the absolute terror on Luffy's face. I forgot, Luffy exclaims hysterically, his tone a mix of horror and despair. The Marine shoots forward, almost faster than Chopper can see. He makes a couple grabs for Luffy, which the team captain desperately dodges, but his steps are stuttering in his nervousness. Eventually, the old man gets a hand on the cuff of Luffy's shirt and lifts him in the air. How dare you forget your grandfather? The old man shouts before slamming a fist down on Luffy's head, throwing the teen into the floor. And all the straw hats present stare dumbly for a few minutes before the exclamations start. Grandfather. A Marine is Luffy's. From outside, Chopper hears similar cries, and as he looks into the gap, he sees an entire platoon of Marines standing outside. What is happening? Ouch. Luffy sits up from his sprawl on the floor and clutches his head. Ouch. You're made of rubber. Sanji's expression slowly changes to scared realization. For it to hurt a rubber man. He's strong. Don't fight him. Luffy is still rubbing the massive bump on his head. He nearly killed me a ton of times when I was a kid. You ungrateful grandson. The Marine accuses. You're the one who asked for training. You didn't have to keep us awake for 2 weeks straight to train us. Luffy protests. Endurance training, the Marine explains dismissively. Or throw us into a sinking rowboat in shark-infested waters when neither of us could swim. Luffy's grandfather snorts. That's both your and Ace's faults for eating those damn devil's fruit in the first place. And when you abandoned us on an island of cannibals. That was a special occasion. The Marine smiles. It was your 10th birthday. We couldn't just do training the normal way. That birthday beeped, Luffy mutters. Are you complaining? The Marine asks lowly, fist raising menacingly. No, I'm not complaining at all. Luffy quickly assures him, scrambling on the floor to get away. And Chopper cannot blame Luffy for his cowardly behavior if even a third of what he said is true. This explains so much, Nami says from the side. I understand Luffy's undying spirit to live now, Sanji comments, hands reaching for a cigarette. Luffy's grandfather is scary, Chopper says, taking a step back himself. Now, don't you think you owe me an apology? The old man demands. After all the training I gave you two so you could be strong Marines, both you and Ace leave to become worthless pirates. We always told you we weren't gonna be Marines. Luffy shouts back. Back talk. No, no, never, Luffy cries. And Chopper just sighs as he watches a similar pattern taking form. And you all. The Marine turns on the rest of the straw hats, and nearly all of them jump. You're following my stupid grandson then. You're all good-for-nothing pirates too, joined his crew. The tense, anxiety-ridden feeling that comes before a battle roars back into Chopper's mind and he tenses, hooves slowly reaching for his backpack to find a rumble ball. Then I should introduce myself. He says, making nearly everyone fall over from shock. My name is Monkey D. Garp, Vice Admiral for the Marines. Gee, Garp, Nami exclaims. The war hero. A war hero, Chopper says with wide eyes. He went toe-to-toe with Roger multiple times. Many said they were evenly matched, Robin elaborates. No wonder Luffy's scared of him, Zoro mutters. I might one day have the pleasure of reeling all of you in. Garp laughs. So I think introductions are in order. Don't bother introducing yourselves though, your names have already graced my desk. Chopper isn't a fan of the ominous way those words are spoken. Wait, Nami says. One day, so does that mean today you're going to let us go? Luffy's grandfather narrows his small eyes on her and she instinctively recoils. Nami looks about to apologize just like Luffy, which Chopper neither faults nor judges her for when Garp lets out a long sigh. I guess not. Taking out CP9 was damn stupid, but at least you didn't do something utterly moronic, like declare war on the world government or something. I'd have to teach you some manners if you were that much of an idiot. Garp laughs like this as a joke, but all the Straw Hats are looking faint. Is it possible that he overheard what Luffy said? Speaking of, their captain looks positively pale. In fact, if Chopper wasn't well aware of Luffy's red meat uptake, Chopper would be worried if his captain was anemic. Yeah, Luffy manages after a moment. Between you and Ace, I don't know how I've managed to keep as young and spry as I have. Garp huffs a sigh. I guess it's my curse to have two rude, ungrateful brats for grandsons. Well, Chopper maybe sees how raising Luffy must have been hell, but Ace is one of the politest pirates Chopper has ever met, maybe even the politest human. Then again, with a Marine for a grandfather. Between the two of you, that's 800 million berry. You're drawing a lot of attention to yourselves, Garp says, seeming serious at this point, almost weary. Chopper's curiosity piques at the tone. It's familiar to him, warmth shrouded by layers and layers of derision and seeming coldness. Dr. Kurha. Chopper takes a mental step away from the image and uses his past guardian as a lens to review the conversation. After running it through in his head, he's left with an intense sense of concern hidden within the barbs and the stories of all Garp put Luffy and Ace through as children. But concern for what? Luffy's life as a pirate. His imprisonment. Other Marines trying to claim his bounty. These are perfectly reasonable concerns, but to subject children to all that for what? For punishment. Or is he trying to make them stronger for something they have to face in the future? The way Chopper sees it, if Garp was worried about Ace and Luffy becoming pirates, then training them would be the last thing he would do. It would only make Garp's duty as a Marine messier and more difficult in the end. Even though Ace and Luffy told their grandfather in the past that they wanted to be pirates, Garp trained them. What was he afraid of then? Something he knew they'd have to face eventually, perhaps. Maybe Garp himself. Chopper doesn't have enough information. He puts the thoughts and the sudden spark of homesickness away for later pondering, and instead wonders how Luffy will reply to the concern. Which it turns out, is by not replying to it. Luffy's eyes appear serious. I'm getting a musician next. Garp laughs, but it's slower. I'm glad you at least saved that for last. Not for lack of trying, Zoro mutters from the side. Luffy starts laughing too and Garp's chuckle builds back into the bellow they all heard before. And even though Luffy's body still has the faintest of tremors running over it, Chopper can maybe see how they're related. It nags at the tips of Chopper's horns though, even as he starts laughing too, what their grandfather is worried Luffy will have to face in the future and why he needs the strength of a monster to do it. But whatever it is, surely Luffy is strong enough to best it, right? Frankie looks around his ship with pride. It's weird, being able to say it's his ship. He doesn't care to do the math to figure out how long exactly it's been since he's built anything, let alone anything he's been proud of. And he is. He's so proud of what he's done. The Thousand Sunny is a ship greater than any of the fantastic dream ships he designed as a child. Maybe it's because he can sense it, feel the wood beneath his fingers, hear the lap of waves against the bow, smell the cooling tar that seals the planks. Dreams aren't supposed to be palpable, they're supposed to disappear once the sun rises. Standing atop them as the currents gently rock from side to side is the last thing a dream should be. After meeting Straw Hat and his lot, many impossible things are happening around him. Frankie sniffs as he recalls his last interaction with Straw Hat. Frankie paces outside of the bungalow for at least 10 minutes, rubbing his head with frustration. He should just tell Straw Hat that he intends to build them the most magnificent ship that ever will be, free of charge, and head out. He almost sent a note, but that just isn't his style. And since he is building the most magnificent ship that ever will be, free of charge, he kind of wants to see their slack-jawed faces. He deserves that. At the same time, something about their group makes Frankie hesitate in approaching the door. They are a warm, strange family with dysfunction galore and misadventures aplenty. Even then, the love they feel for each other is unparalleled. He feels strange stepping into their circle, mostly because he gets a strange feeling of belonging that just shouldn't happen with relative strangers. Yes, they took down an elite group of assassins, saved Iceberg's life, and averted a governmental coup, but that doesn't mean he knows any of them, even if it feels like he does. Frankie shouldn't be putting up with this indecisiveness shit. He should be building the ship right now. He can get Iceberg to tell them later. Frankie is startled from his thoughts when he runs into someone. Due to his super girth and weight, Frankie's fine, but the littler guy is laid out on his butt. The other man has a strangely long nose and curly dark hair. He mutters to himself before standing from the ground. "Geez, watch where you're walking," Long Nose says. Frankie narrows his eyes and starts to retort, but Long Nose's expression has gone blank as he finally stares at Frankie. Frankie stands up straighter. Tales of his super skills must have spread through the island. Long Nose confirms his suspicions. "You were with them, Lou, the Straw Hat Pirates, when those assassins attacked?" Frankie nods and strikes a pose. "Oh yeah, the Super Assassin Slayer, at your service. Are you going to meet with them?" Yeah, maybe. I don't really know if I want to. That Straw Hat bro is kind of an odd one." Long Nose nods. "More than you know." There's a pause. "You should go in there. They'll be happy to see you." There's a dark sense of self-deprecation that has Frankie frowning. Before he can say anything, Long Nose is walking away. "Hey, did you come to meet with them too?" Frankie calls, but receives no response. Frankie hesitates a moment before turning and entering the bungalow Iceberg supplied them with. In the living room, Frankie finds Chopper and Zoro, the former reading and the latter napping on the couch. Through the open French doors, Frankie sees Nami and Sanji lounging outside. Straw Hat and Robin are somewhere else, it seems. "Frankie!" Chopper exclaims, standing up and walking to Frankie. The cyborg can see the doctor looking over his patched-up body critically. "Yo," Frankie greets. "Where's Straw Hat? I need to talk to him about something." Chopper points to one of the doors, one of the only ones that are shut. He walks over, aware of the eyes on his back. They aren't judgmental, but they are very present. Frankie enters without knocking and finds Straw Hat lying on his back on a bed, halfway over the edge of it so that he's nearly falling off. Nico Robin sits in a nearby chair, Straw Hat in her lap, and she's reading a story to her captain when she cuts off her sentence halfway. "Frankie!" Luffy cheers, arms stretching out and nearly overbalancing him to the floor. Nico Robin closes her book, stands and dips her head. "We'll finish up this chapter later. MMMKAY. Nico Robin leaves, shutting the door behind her. Luffy keeps his position, head dangling off the side of the bed and a few inches from the ground. His rubbery neck makes his head bounce with his breath, and Frankie gets a little sick just looking at it. "What's up?" Frankie puffs his chest out. "Iceberg said he'll fund your new ship, but I'm going to design and build it." Luffy's face spreads into a beaming grin and he extends his hands out in glee. "Yes," he laughs. "The best shipwright is going to design the ship that will take me to One Piece." Never let it be said that Straw Hat doesn't dream big. Frankie can't help but strike a pose and smile, because it's a damn true statement, and his superness deserves recognition every now and then. Frankie starts explaining about the wood he found, and some of his plans to the captain, who oohs and ahs and is impressed by everything Frankie says. Frankie strikes more poses. "Anything you want in particular?" Frankie asks at the end of his explanation for his preliminary ideas. "I saw that the Going Merry had a grove for mikan trees, so that has to be included. Is there anything else?" Frankie is expecting a request for a huge kitchen, or maybe a sentimental list of all the different areas his Nakama needs special made for them. Luffy's that kind of idiot, and it doesn't make Frankie cry at all, even if he is inspirational and moving, or maybe even for Luffy to blow the question off. He isn't expecting Luffy to look up at him, upside down on the bed and exclaim, "Build me a ship that can circumnavigate the world." Franky feels like he's been launched into the air, and he's hovering at the top of that arc, floating before gravity kicks back in. For some reason, it hasn't though, not yet. His mouth falls open and he stares. I will. What else can he say? Good. Luffy nods to himself, like his asking this is par for the course, something he's been meaning to say all along, just hasn't gotten to it until now. It's surreal. You can't know a ship circumnavigated the world, you know, if you aren't on it. Franky bristles, but not near as much as he normally would at someone suggesting he leave his family behind. Maybe because he thinks Luffy already knows about those considerations, but he's asking Franky anyway, to do this thing bigger than it all. I can't leave, Franky says. If the ship breaks and needs to be fixed, there isn't anyone in the world who can do it, but you, Straw Hat points out. That isn't true, he tries. Not the ship that's going to circumnavigate the world, not the one that'll reach One Piece, Luffy says. Not just anyone can. That is true. The thought of anyone adding or mending the ship he's already built in his mind makes him shift his gears uncomfortably. But he can't really be thinking of leaving the Franky family, can he? You're a wanted person now, you know. Luffy says. Someone from the family came down and begged for us to take you so you'd be safe. They should have minded their own damn business. Their family, Luffy says, shrugging his shoulders and making his elastic head bob down to the floor. Franky grits his teeth. Hates and loves his family for sticking their noses where they don't belong, because he understands where they're coming from too well, and that makes him want to swear holy hell up and down the seashore. But the strength flows out of him. He runs a hand over his hair, growls, half-heartedly. Well, shit, he turns to exit, can't face the captain's piercing eyes. I can't promise anything, I still need to talk to my sisters. But I might add space for an exceptionally super cyborg on your ship. Luffy laughs and cheers and says thank you. Franky doesn't turn around. He leaves and shuts the door behind him. He stares at the wood floor for a long time before walking out on the veranda for some fresh air. Nami's still lounging on a lawn chair reading a book, but Sanji has disappeared. Zoro has taken a place against a support beam on the porch, still sleeping. Franky walks past Nami and leans on the metal railing, looks out over the ocean, sees the sea train on the horizon and wonders how Coker is doing. He feels frustrated at his family and the sudden situation he's in with the law, but he feels this wave of relief. It's been a rollercoaster week with the business with CP9 and Iceberg and this weird brat who knows everything about Franky and his life, but like it's an offhand thing, instead of uncanny. To know all the information about Pluton and Tom was one impossible matter, but to say the words that float in Franky's dreams and thoughts like a wish for a future that he's never been able to build before despite all his skill. Luffy says it, and brings it about. And it's super but just impossible. He doubts he'll get a straightforward answer even if he does pry. Did he completely guess something no one could ever know? Nami asks, turning a page of her book. Franky turns and nods. Yeah, he does that, Zoro says, cracking an eye open. Sanji steps out of the house and onto the porch. He gives Nami a tropical-looking drink with a little umbrella. He presses a cold beer against the samurai's head, who growls before taking it, and he offers Franky a glass of lemonade. Franky's surprised at being included, but it fits this little group. He sips, and it is delicious. Drinks dispersed, Sanji lights a cigarette and takes a drag. Sanji says, he does it all the time. He told us he was going to find a shipwright the next island we went to, and here we are, the shipbuilding capital of the world. Someone should really get him to quit it already, Nami says. It's getting out of hand. Or apply it to getting more beautiful women on the crew, the chef says, eyes glazing over. You get used to Luffy's knowing, Nami assures as she leans towards Franky. It stops being so weird eventually, though he still has his moments. But you'll see soon anyways, I guess. Franky stares into his lemonade, doesn't quite know how to tell her he hasn't said yes yet. But he has a feeling they'd blow off his words if he did give them a voice, because who is he kidding? This whole island has been a moment, Zoro says. So, it isn't always so crazy? Franky asks. Sanji chokes on his cigarette, Nami almost swallows her straw and Zoro snorts. After recovering, Nami surprises him with a merry laugh so bright he wouldn't have thought could come from her. This is completely normal, Zoro says. A little more government than usual, but still about a regular adventure for us. Can you imagine a normal island where Luffy doesn't find some kind of trouble? Sanji asks, tapping his cigarette and smiling. Our strangest adventure yet, Nami says. The three pirates chuckle together at that, and it's an unwinding moment Frankie likes being in the middle of. He makes his excuses for leaving. He has a feeling if he doesn't escape now, he'll be roped into some kind of party and he won't leave until this time tomorrow. Regardless of whether he'll be on the ship or not, he does need to get started on it. This time, he meets the intent gazes of the Straw Hats and bids them goodbye with a smile and wave. He glances at the shut door and hears a rattling snore in exchange. He leaves the bungalow grinning. Frankie knows the figurehead has to be something equally bright and joyous as the group, something eternal. It's been a fantastic week, hard to completely grasp, but Frankie thinks the most impossible part might just be that Monkey D. Luffy asked someone to build him a ship that can circumnavigate the world, and miraculously, he asked the only son of a gun with the chutzpah to do just that. There's certainty in Luffy's words, like he knew Frankie would say yes, like he knows Frankie can do it. The lack of doubt is a bomb on a sore in his soul he didn't know he had. There's been a lot of doubt in his life since Tom died, even before that. But now, all he feels is confidence. He puts a skip in his step and scares some passers-by, but he doesn't spare them a glance. He's got a masterpiece to build. Now, nearly 3 weeks later, he stands on the finished project of what is without a doubt the most stunning craft to ever grace the waters. Only the details need to be added in now, the carvings on the wall molding to match the bookcases in what's to be Nico Robin's study. More leaves for the kitchen table so it can be expanded for whoever comes onto the ship and eats, whether they're there to stay or not, making sure the straps he installed are strong enough to hold Zoro's weights and keep all of Chopper's medical supplies tacked to the wall in case of choppy weather, and a proper desk for cartography, one that can be moved if Nami wants to change where she works, etc. etc. To make such special details, he's had to spend some time with the Straw Hats to get a grasp of their needs, to see how they move through space so he can shape the ship around them. It hasn't been a burden, spending time with them. Frankie gets along well with all of them, he finds, almost better than some of them seem to get along with each other. Zoro and Sanji, of course, that's just Frankie's super personality. There was one minor blip as he was trying to figure out how many specialized rooms there needed to be. Luffy said during dinner, blissfully offhand, that there needed to be a place to store ammunition and different kinds of slingshot ammos, as well as some spare paint for art projects. The rest of the table went quiet, and nearly all of them had different reactions, with Zoro looking dubious, Robin concerned, Chopper and Nami relieved, and Sanji smug. Frankie's heard about their crewmate, the sniper, mostly through how they talk around the subject. What they don't say leaves an impression that's slowly formed a shape and story to Frankie. There was a crewmate who left the crew or was booted off. Something to do with the safety of the crew in the previous ship. Frankie's curious, but he's never been one to pry. He'd take the measurements to build the cupboards for ammo and paint because Luffy asked him to. However it pans out, Frankie isn't sure he completely cares. Frankie walks below deck and reaches an area he had, some weeks ago, made a cursory act of parsing away for himself if he were to join the crew. He's had a lot of time to think. His family had been in united, raucous and tearful support of his leaving. Iceberg was a jerk, but seemed to think in that weirdly fine way of his that Frankie and the Straw Hats deserved each other. For himself, well, the past weeks, he's seen his magnificent ship come together under his and Iceberg's hands. And he can't think of anywhere else he could want to be. Frankie wants to die on this ship, if he can. So with a weighted hand, he measures out the length of his work table, his docking system, a place for a cyborg-sized hammock, and where he can stock a mini-fridge of cola. It's almost solemn, and when he walks away from the ship to go to sleep that night, he still feels her gentle rocking, the thousand sunnies, and knows it's the rhythm of his future. Usopp sits atop the Going Merry's figurehead and looks out at the horizon. He's assuming the pose that Luffy had taken for so many hours in their time sailing, the one facing to the horizon, where he could always spot the island before anyone else. Usopp doesn't see anything of the kind waiting for him. Mary floats benignly beside the town of Water 7, steadily anchored. Behind him, Usopp knows people are battening down their hatches, covering their yards with tarps and adding wooden supports to their houses. Aqua Laguna is coming. Usopp remembers hearing about it a little when they first came to town, scuttlebutt around the bait shops. He didn't think they'd be here long enough for it to be a problem for them. Now it is a problem, but he suspects only for him. Usopp heard that a man named Frankie and the mayor of the city, Iceberg, are building the Straw Hat Pirates a ship among ships in return for their help in a time of crisis, in addition to putting them up. The Straw Hats' most recent adventure had been the talk of the town, and Usopp had only heard about it the day after it happened. He'd felt worry when he'd first heard, wondered if they were all right. Did anyone get seriously hurt without Usopp there to back them up? They should have told him. He would have helped. As he listened more to the townsfolk and heard all the details, a numbness set in. They were all fine. They defeated a secret government organization supposed to be some of the strongest in history. Everyone lived. No one needed a guy with a slingshot to survive the adventure. And didn't that just prove Luffy's words about being useless? Luffy's words are his own. A few days after, Usopp stomped over to the bungalow where they were staying with the intention of checking up on them, making sure they were all right. And if someone begged him to stay and never ever leave them again, then perhaps he'd stick around. He bumped into that big blue-haired cyborg that Usopp finally attached the name Frankie to. The dichotomy of their situation made Usopp sick. Frankie was going to walk into the bungalow and be asked to join the crew with the warmest tones and most earnest promises Luffy keeps stored behind his eyes for special occasions if Frankie hadn't already joined the crew by that point. And Usopp had been in the crew, should have been inside with them, waiting for a new nakama to be one of them. But he was on the outside, pacing and pacing. He'd seen Frankie in and then ran back to the outskirts where he's been keeping Mary docked. He locked himself in the captain's cabin and laid on his back in the dark until sunrise. Aqua Laguna has been creeping closer and closer in his periphery for a while. Time has been flying by while he's practiced his acceptance speech over and over for Luffy's inevitable apology. He practiced an apology speech for his own actions only once, for the craft of it, but couldn't seem to make the words move past the lump in his throat, so he went back to acceptance speeches. Nearly a month has passed him by, like a brisk sea breeze, in this fashion. Aqua Laguna, like Luffy, was something he's just been avoiding thinking about for a long time. But not anymore. Today's the day, and he, in all his tactical mastery, has no plans. He doesn't have the money to store the Mary in one of the higher docks. Those have been booked months in advance it seems. Mary is still too sick for him to ride her out into open water, so he was forced to stay here and face Mary's inevitable destruction. Today, Aqua Laguna is due to hit Water 7. As he understands it, the water will pull back from the edges of the island, assembling energy for one massive tidal wave that will sweep through the lower half of town. Usopp will sit on the Mary, pat her head as her keel scratches against the ocean floor when the water recedes, and weep with her when the wave finally comes for them and destroys them both. Maybe he should be upset, as he looks into the horizon and pictures this scenario over and over, but the emotion, just like the apology, is stuck in his throat. He thinks he would have liked to help the Straw Hats on this adventure, just one last one before he and Mary went, but it didn't happen. They've moved on, and he's sitting here, waiting to be stuck here permanently, his body amid the wrecked parts of what used to be a beautiful ship that will likely wash up together eventually. He's so wrapped up in his thoughts, that when Luffy sits next to him he nearly falls off the figurehead. Luffy. He bites his tongue. He didn't want to talk first, but surprise squeezed the word out of him. Well, this just puts the ball in Luffy's court. Except Luffy doesn't say anything, doesn't look in Usopp's direction. Instead he stares off into the horizon, like usual, and it's like he sees something. It always seems that way, anyways. Usopp looks out too, but this time he sees something too, a building form in the distance. Aqua Laguna. You shouldn't be here, Usopp says, swallowing some of his pride. You need to get somewhere safe. You too, Luffy says. Usopp shakes his head, pulls his legs up so he can wrap an arm around them. I belong here with the Mary. I'm not leaving her behind. Mary wouldn't want you to die like this. What do you know about what Mary wants? You wanted to scrap her. Luffy frowns. You know, on Skypia, when everything was suddenly fixed after the upshot. That was Mary, right? A ship that goes so far to keep her passengers safe wants them to live. The water level is sinking as they speak, and Usopp fights against his tears. What if I don't want to? A vein bulges in Luffy's throat, and his eyes become so intense Usopp feels he might light on fire. He waits for a shout or a punch, but it doesn't come. Don't, is all Luffy says. Why do you care? Usopp demands. I can't contribute to your crew, you all did fine in the last fight without me. You don't need me, none of you do. Did you ever think that we wanted you? Luffy finally shouts. Did you ever think that you belonged with us because you had a dream and you wanted to be there, not because of what you can or can't do? Usopp blinks, finds water covering his eyelashes and has to scrub it away. Luffy continues, me and the ship, we have a job we have to do, otherwise we don't have a crew, and people can't chase their dreams. That's an expectation I choose and I want. I don't pin things on other people. I don't pin them on you. Usopp can't think of a single counter-argument. They all chose their responsibilities. Usopp just didn't understand what his was. It was what he made it to be based on Luffy and the stories he'd heard as a kid, but reality never featured so heavily in his opinions. Now he realizes things are different than stories, and for one of the first times, it's even better. And if Mary did have a voice, for the first time, he thinks he can actually hear what she's saying. And it sounds like live. Luffy stands and jumps off the figurehead. He starts walking back to the town, and Usopp's mouth falls open. Luffy, he says, trying to get the captain's attention. It doesn't work. Luffy keeps walking. Hey, Luffy. Should Usopp just follow him? Can it be the same unspoken agreement as last time? It seems a betrayal of something. Usopp looks down at Mary, remembers Kaya's bright smile despite her wan demeanor and all the stress and suffering she'd only just undergone. He remembers his promise to her. He wants to leave this island so dreadfully all of a sudden it nauseates him. He wants to see other islands, meet new people, and try different things. He wants to see what all is out there, and no image of that is complete without Straw Hats, his crew, without his Nakama. On the figurehead of the Going Merry, Usopp bows his head so his nose touches her weathered paint. He draws his strength from his beloved ship to break down the block in his throat and finally gets the words out. I'm sorry, he says, little more than a whisper. I'm sorry. Louder now. I was stubborn. I didn't know, didn't realize. He's an ugly crier and he's sure he's making an absolute mess of himself, but as he glances up, Luffy turns around. And face to face he pleads, please, just once more, let me be your Nakama. Luffy's face unfolds into something beautiful, bright and happy, ringed with tears and so relieved. Usopp laughs, and gets that even if he isn't necessarily needed, not now, anyways he is truly, very wanted. Join my crew, Luffy says. A rubber hand shoots up towards Usopp, and he instantly takes it. The two snap together when Luffy's hand rescinds, but running into Luffy has never hurt before and now it only feels affirming. We gotta hurry, Luffy says, and the two start running towards the town. Usopp risks a look back at the Going Merry, one last look, and then blanches at the astonishing sight of Aqua Laguna. Where are you all holed up? Luffy hums. Very few things end up as predicted when Luffy hums. We're not holed up, we're getting ready to leave right now. A pause. What? Usopp nearly trips. How can you leave when the wave is coming? Do you have another way out? Can the ship fly? Can we please wait? Are we going to die? Luffy laughs. Nah, it can't fly, it's much better. And we can't really stay. My grandfather is going to try and sink us the moment the storm has cleared, so we need to leave now. Your grandfather? Yeah, he's scary. He's a vice admiral in the Marines. Luffy stops and extends his hand to a post way off in the distance. Wait, wah! Usopp screams as Luffy grabs him and the two rocket across town, past the post he grabbed, and only barely hit against the sails of a large galleon without overshooting. Usopp slides down and falls on his head. He feels his spirit leaving his body. Luffy pulls him up. No rest for the dead it seems. This is Frankie. Luffy formally introduces them as the rain starts coming down hard. Usopp sees the entire crew staring at him and is more than a little moved to see they're all smiling and most all glassy-eyed. Frankie, this is Usopp. Frankie offers a fist bump. Nice to meet you, long nose bro. Usopp pauses only a second before returning the gesture. Then Frankie is in a fit of motion, off to the helm which he takes assuredly. How are we getting out of this? Usopp asks Nami. We're going to jump over the wave, Robin answers instead, genial. Luffy's hat hangs around her neck by the string and she's soaked to the bone. He manages. Because even for Luffy, everyone take hold of something. Frankie says. The crew automatically complies, Zoro getting rope for them to tie themselves to the ship. Usopp attaches himself and then assists Chopper, whose hooves sometimes trip over the more complicated knots, especially when there's wet weather. Luffy's given himself enough slack that he can haul up the mainsail so everything's furled and tucked in. Usopp clutches the mast as he looks up at Aqua Laguna. Frankie has brought them around the island so they're facing the monstrous wave. With some kind of counterweight system, the whole ship leans back so they're at a steep angle. Usopp's knees knock together and he and Chopper cling to each other. He doesn't have time for a speech or a comforting story about the time he averted a wave a bit larger than this one from hitting an island of rabbit people by challenging the nearby sea god to a surfing competition, which Usopp happened to win by landslide. He doesn't have time, because Frankie cries out. Coup de burst. There's an explosion from the rear of the ship and suddenly, they're airborne in a tight upward arc climbing higher and higher up the wave. Between screams, Usopp glances off the side of the ship in time to see a little white and brown ship crash against the island and break apart. Thank you. A giggle, and soft whisper against his ear from something ethereal. Usopp clutches the side of the ship tighter and takes a deep gasp and shouts into the wind. Luffy laughs like a maniac, Frankie right along with him as the rest of them cling for dear life as they keep shooting upwards. Usopp is 200% sure they aren't going to make it until they do. The ship clips the very top of Aqua Laguna before landing on the water behind the crest and they're suddenly on their way down like it's reverse mountain and Usopp looks at his crew around his watering eyes from the rush of air. They're all here still, and then some, even if the wood isn't the same. When they finally reach calm waters and they take a moment to catch their breaths and unwind literally, in Chopper's case as he got all wrapped up in rope, Frankie immediately starts diagnosing the ship, looking around at all the different pieces and talking aloud to himself on repairs. And Usopp thinks, maybe it's time for him to explore different things he can be, rather than just a makeshift shipwright. What responsibilities does he want to take on? Now that he isn't limiting himself, there's a lot he can choose from. This begs a large and well-drawn multicolored plan with different versions of himself drawn for comparison. Hey, are there any art supplies on the ship, and maybe somewhere dry for me to draw? Usopp asks. He receives smiles and multiple points towards a door off to the side on the main cabin with a white and brown ram's head carved into the center of the wood. Late at night, when the sea finally falls quiet, Robin returns Luffy's hat. He comes up to the crow's nest during her watch shift, balancing tea and cocoa in a haphazard dance. She smiles when she sees him and takes the offered tea with quiet thanks. He seems content to spend the time in silence, looking out at the stars tonight, as they sometimes do together when he finds her in melancholy or pensive attitudes in the dark. She's a little of both right now, but to truly ponder it, she needs to talk it out this time. Robin sets her tea down next to his hot chocolate which was empty 5 minutes after he sat down beside her. She takes off the straw hat which she has cherished for nearly a month and holds it out to him. It's an extension of her captain, and it guarded her well over their turbulent stay in the city of Water 7, but now it's time for it to return to Luffy. She's safe, he doesn't have to worry about her anymore, charming as his concern is. He goes to take it, lingers over her hands, touches her palms. Ace thought so too, he didn't think he deserved to live either, Luffy says idly. Her breath catches, he didn't know that he shouldn't do it alone. 'Cause sometimes only other people can see what we're really worth. Luffy takes the hat and settles it on his head. Robin's hands falter, still outstretched, and it takes a moment for her to pull them back. She doesn't know what to say. Luffy pulls the hat down so it covers his eyes. You can only die if you're happy. Now, on the sea, when you're with us and happy, you can die if you want, he says, like he has to pull the words out, and Robin's heart speeds up even as it aches, because it sounds like he understands her, understands the word suicide hanging over her head, that he can't stop her if she's made up her mind. The understanding, it's almost too much for her to consider, though she knows little of his background. Not Luffy, anyone but Luffy. But I won't let you die sad. Luffy adjusts his hat again and meets her eyes, fervent looking. Robin sits in the crow's nest on the most magnificent ship on the entire sea, next to her phenomenal inimitable captain, amid treasured nakama, sailing towards their dreams with the light touch of a child who knows what the word adventure really means, and what unconditional love still looks like. I want to live, she utters for the first time in her entire life. She surprises herself, but she means it. She can't say she wants to live without them, but here and now, she wants to live with them so much her body trembles. She's happy to still be here. She didn't just survive the encounter with CP9 and the government this time, she won. Good, I do too. Luffy beams and lets out a breath. I want you to live. Robin smiles and laughs just a little. Luffy hums. I know it seems you already know my story, she says. I don't know how, but I would like to tell it to you myself, if you're interested. Luffy's eyes light up. He listens attentively as she starts her story with tremulous words that grow surer as time passes. Luffy interrupts and asks her questions she never thought to explain before. What Ohara looked like, her favorite plants and flowers, what the Tree of Knowledge did, if Clover knew any good jokes, did it have tigers? It stirs a cloud of nostalgia instead of the deep throbbing pain dipping into her past has always brought on. When she reaches the end of her narrative she takes a slow breath in and out and lets the brisk sea breeze clear out the musty air that's been lurking in her lungs. Luffy beams. Relief sweeps her, though she doesn't understand it. Luffy's known this whole time, however that happened. Telling him herself though seems to have done something to the energy around her because the tenseness from years and years of running has let go and she finds herself almost weightless without the oppressing pressure. They sit in the dark for a while longer until they hear someone coming up. Frankie, here for his first night watch. The shipwright seems surprised to see both of them there, but smiles. Robin dips her head and says goodnight to both men. Now it's Frankie's turn with the captain. After staggering down on legs partially asleep, Robin goes back to the latest cabin. She slips in quietly, but realizes that Nami is still awake by her change in breathing. Did Luffy corner you in the crow's nest? Nami asks. The words clear up why the red-haired woman is still awake. Robin knows that Nami has an extremely special place in her heart for Luffy and Luffy alone. Everyone on the crew does to some extent, but the navigator's concern is more overt than any of theirs. Robin doesn't take it personally, although she had thought they were making progress. He did, Robin eventually answers while shrugging off her blue button-down shirt in the dark. He likes doing that, even though he gets so sleepy in the morning. Nami's voice is that familiar mix of fondness and exasperation that anyone who knows their captain is intimate with. Did you two talk about your dream? Robin pauses for a moment as she slips on her sleeping shorts. Yes. Nami is silent after that, so Robin shrugs inwardly and lies down in her bed. Her eyes are only shut for a second when Nami speaks again. What is your dream, Robin? Nami asks. Robin's eyes open and widen minutely in surprise. Nami's next words are rehearsed, adding another layer of charm. I just realized that I never asked. As Nakama, I figured it was about time I found out. In the dark of the ship, a smile slips over Robin's face, and she knows that she's found her friends, her home. And so she explains. Because for someone whose island was destroyed, the wanting to know means more than she can ever say. Ace is shoving a flank of beef into his mouth when he hears Thatch exclaim, "Hey, isn't that Ace's brother?" The dining hall is relatively full this morning, so there are plenty of people nearby to recoil in disgust as Ace spits out the half-chewed cow. He turns towards the commander who was reading the paper beside their father's shoulder on a high stool. What? Ace asks, trotting up to them. Whitebeard pulls out a bounty from the paper and shows it to Ace, who promptly snatches it up. Ace laughs. Who? Luffy is going to be pissed. What is it? Thatch asks. His bounty is only 300 million berry. It only doubled instead of tripling like last time, Ace says as he looks over his brother's photo. Tripled, Thatch asks, and Ace freezes. He forgot that it tripled last time as in the last timeline. But Marco sighs from a nearby table. That's right, he was complaining about his bounty from last time even though it tripled from 50 million to 150 million. He's kind of a brat, Marco says, and Ace pauses. Yes, Graceless. What happened? He asks his father, moving on. He wants to know where Luffy is in his search for Nakama. Apparently he dispatched a governmental organization, Cypher Pol, if you remember them. I've heard they were planning a coup, from some of my associates. There's a din from those nearby who remember the organization and all they did. Not big fish, but certainly not small fries. Ace waits. And waits. That's it, he asks at length. Apparently Luffy figured out how to be more subtle achieving his goals instead of attacking Enies lobby. No wonder it only doubled. That's it, he says, Marco mutters from the table. I dunno. I was expecting him to declare war on the world government, or fight a Shichibukai. His words catch up to him, and he laughs, even though everyone else stares, except their father, who joins in. You and your brother are kind of scary, Thatch says, before he joins their cheer too. Well, if this young upstart is causing a fuss all on his own, perhaps it's time we stirred the waters once more. I think those recently coming into the new world haven't been properly briefed about our family, Shirohige says. Ace knows it's time now. The mourning period for Blackbeard and their family bond is over. Their father stands and throws the newspaper down. Which commanders would like to raid a naval base, and which would like to greet the new folks at the gate of the new world? Shirohige asks. Cheers rise from the men, and Ace, Thatch, Marco, Izu and all the other commanders nearby immediately start arguing and making their cases to get on the water. It's normalcy, a new kind, that Ace never got to experience after his death, and even in this new life, preoccupied as he's been. Luffy's clearly doing well for himself, gathering his Nakama and shaking up the world as he goes. It's time Ace did too. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.